Planning Board for Tuesday, January 16th. Let's see, we don't have to appoint any alternates today. Let me remind everybody that's going to address the board to sign in on the clipboard in front of on the table up here and make sure the microphones are turned on. For the benefit of anyone that's here to talk about the Merrimack Parcel A at the Outlet Mall, we are going to reorder the agenda to take items 5 and 6 before that one, because those should be a little bit quicker, and we'll get those folks out of here before we have a longer, probably more developed discussion on item 6. So the agenda will be 3, 5, 6, 4 in terms of the items on the agenda tonight. With that, our next planning board meeting after tonight is February 6, 2018, 7 p.m. in this room. And that brings us to the Planning and Zoning Administrator's report. Robert, have you got anything for us tonight?
Yep, just that the Southwood Corporation subdivision that's before you this evening is not one of regional impact, as staff is recommending.
All right, so the staff's provided a recommendation with some supporting materials that the Southwood Corporation's subdivision is not of regional impact. Is there any discussion by members of the board? If not, what's the will of the board with respect to that recommendation?
I will so move.
Moved by Lynn Christensen.
I'll second it, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Alistair Milnes to support the staff's recommendation. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 7-0-0. Any other items, Robert? Any other questions by members of the board for the staff? Okay. That will bring us to item 3 on the agenda, which is Hoyle Tanner and Associates as the applicant and OVP Management, Inc. as the owner. Review for acceptance and consideration of a waiver of full site plan review for a drive-up ATM and associated site improvements. The parcel is located at 360 Daniel Webster Highway in the C2 General Commercial Aquifer Conservation Planned Residential Overlay and Elderly Housing Overlay Districts. It is tax map 4D3 Lot 1. The item is continued from our November 7th Planning Board meeting, and I am going to recuse myself from consideration and discussion of this item and turn the gavel over to our Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In view of the fact that Bob has withdrawn for this item, I will appoint Nelson to sit in and be the voting member just for this item only. Good evening. It's over to you.
All right, thank you. Good evening. My name is Bill Davidson from Hoyle Tanner.
You turn on your mic.
Your microphone's not on, sir. Bright green light.
There you go.
Okay.
They feel happier now.
So we were here middle of summer, I believe.
Could
or
I
maybe early
suggest
summer.
I mean, it was hard enough to find the damned ATM on the drawing in the first place.
I have a couple drawings if you want that.
Well, we have that size drawing. That's.
It's just this. All we're talking about is very small.
We've got that. We've got those.
This is very small ATM that we have. If we had known this location here, if we had known, we would have had it approved.
They can't hear you unless you have the mic.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
That's fine.
All right. So if we had known this a couple months ago, I think we had approval in May. We would have done it at that time. It's a very small, simple addition of an ATM on the east side of the property. We had asked for a waiver from full site plan regulations and review. If anybody's been by that area, you can see there's been a lot of construction going on there. We've worked through some issues with an abutter with the credit union, and we actually have paved a portion of that site and put up fencing so that they can now access through that property. And that was one of the reasons we were supposed to be on earlier than this, but we had to work through some of those issues. So really all we're here for is the small ATM kiosk, a drive aisle for that. Not a major addition. It's just we didn't include it the first time around because we weren't aware of it.
Okay. Does anybody want to ask any questions, or do we consider that there's enough information for us to act on it? Nelson first, Desiree second.
Okay, first of all, how big is this? What are the dimensions?
It is 8 by 11. The entire square footage is 1,735. We have a waiver. Did you guys get the waiver request that we had? So the total.
No, we
footprint-
didn't get the formal waiver request. It's been noted on the letters to us that it was going to be asked for.
So it's, with the pavement and the kiosk, it's an additional 1,735 feet of impervious.
Square feet of impervious.
Yep.
Yeah. What was the size of the ATM unit itself,
It's 11 feet long, and it's 3 feet wide,
and how high?
11 feet high.
11 feet high. Is there an overhang or a weatherproofing?
There is. I do have one picture of it. I do have one picture of it right like that.
Could you pass that round, please? Yes, let's all have a quick glance
Okay,
at it.
yes, I will. You want to take? You got it. Yeah. Okay. My only other issue, Mr. Chairman, would be that it appears to me that this is in the setback, and for buildings, and
Sorry. Well, you're saying, Nelson, it's too close to the road.
yes.
Is it defined as a building?
No, so my interpretation of this is that it's not going to be classified as a structure. Parking islands themselves do not fall under that section anyway. The location of it itself is 20 feet back out. The DW Highway's got the 50-foot setback anyway. The island, the location of this is outside of that 20 feet area anyhow. So we're classifying it as it's going to fall under other site improvements, which would be allowed in that area, whereas the 50-foot setback would be more for a more permanent, like, building type of structure. So in this case, the ATM itself being it's going to be affixed to that island, but we're interpreting it to be more of a portable type thing. So that's why it's not going to be classified as a structure in this case. So the setback does not apply.
Looks permanent to me.
Portable.
So I have just
Desiree?
just one question on it. Is there any rules for stacking of traffic, like an extra car there, or how is there? Because I know like drive-throughs, you would have that, but in this case, if anybody stacks there, they're going to be kind of blocking the parking aisle.
Yeah, there's really only about room for about 2 there, but there's also, they can also navigate around. There's enough room there that they can navigate
Okay.
around that.
And you'll only be approaching this on the Daniel Webster Street side, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Any
Using
other
it.
questions from anybody? May I have comment about whether we consider this is suitable for us to take a decision on?
I'll move we accept the application as complete. Is that what
Thank
you're
you,
looking
Lynn. And Michael, secondly. Thank you both. Would all in favour say aye?
for? Aye.
Again, negative? No? Everybody's in favour? Sure. 700 to accept the application. Any more questions from anybody else? Shall we take up the waiver? Yes, please, Tom.
So you said, why didn't you bring this forward earlier? You didn't know it was there?
No, we didn't know, at the time, the OVP management is the owner that's working with all the leases. And they had to work through a lease with this certain individual. And at the time, we went to the planning board in, I think it was in April or May. They weren't working with that individual. So we didn't know there was going to be an ATM on the property.
Okay, I mean, there are ATMs all over the place. It seems a little odd to go through all this trouble to stick one outside the edge of your parking lot. I'm just trying to understand more why we're doing this. And maybe that's not a fair question for the planning board, but what looks to me to be a permanent structure is going to go into a place that doesn't seem appropriate, and traffic in and out seems kind of bizarre. When you leave that ATM, if that's the only reason you came in, you're going all the way back to the light to get back out of there, right?
Yeah,
Or-
you would take a left-hand turn, go through the parking lot and out to the light. I don't know for sure, but I don't believe that the ATM, I think that they're looking at as an accessory use for people that are using the plaza or there already. They don't,
Wouldn't it be near the plaza then? I mean, maybe I'm just being
Yeah,
treacherous,
no.
but
I've questioned it myself as well because I'm used to seeing where ATMs are closer to buildings and attached to buildings and things like that. But I've talked to a lot of people at my work. One woman in particular that has 3 children, and she loves this type of an ATM where she has the kids in the car. She can drive up. She doesn't actually have to get out of the car and bring the kids over to the building. So that's one reason that I think people like this type of a setup.
But there's one at the credit union right there on the corner. There's several of them all over the place around town. So it just seems kind of odd to stick one out like that, causing what I think is going to be a traffic concern. Because you're not going to exit out that right-hand, what was an entrance only, and I think you turned it into an entrance exit for the tenants that are on the corner, or not?
On the right side, nope, that's still gonna remain just an entrance. So they will not be going out that way.
Okay, so they are circulating all the way around the parking lot to get back out of the.
Anything else? Michael?
And you are showing a stop sign, right? So
Yes, there's a stop
There's some
sign, and then
control
there's a
there.
do not enter, and there'll be pavement markings showing one way as well.
Okay.
All right. Shall we take up the question of the waiver over full site plan review based on what we've heard? Somebody wants to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and make a motion to accept the waiver for full site plan review based upon specific circumstance relative to the subdivision of the land, such if the waiver will properly carry out the spirit and intent.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Desiree got in first, just. All in favour, say aye. Aye. And noes? Nobody? 700. All right, that really moves us on, unless there's any further questions, to the decision.
Public hearing?
Oh, sorry, public hearing. Thank you, Desiree, for putting me straight. Does anybody in the assembled gathering want to make a comment on the installation of this, or potential installation of this ATM? I'm going once. Right, I'll close the public hearing. We'll move back to the motion then. Thank you, Desiree. Did I hear you say anything?
All right. I will make a motion that we approve this application. What's the words? With the staff's comment.
Subject to basically the memo dated
Oh yes. thank
January
you.
9th, 2018.
Yes. Yes.
All in favour of the motion? And Mike seconded. All in favour? You're not in favour? All in favour, say aye. Aye. Any against?
Nay.
All right, 6-1-0 with Mr. Koenig objecting. And that means you approve, sir. And with that, I shall be very happy to give the gavel back to my esteemed boss.
Thank you very much. And okay, so the next item on the agenda is number 4, which we've decided to reorder. So we're going to set that one aside and go to number 5, which is Martha Brooks as the applicant and owner. Review for a home occupation permit to allow for an art studio. The parcel is located at 82 Wire Road in the R1 Residential and Aquifer Conservation Districts. It is tax map 6C, lot 288. Robert, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Nope, just everything's already laid out in the memo.
Very good. Is Ms. Brooks here? Come on forward.
Mike's on.
Sign in on the clipboard, and then when you're all settled and ready, tell us a little bit about what you want to do.
In June, I became a certified Zentangle art teacher, and I would like to have classes of 6 to 8 people on my first floor. I'm currently doing that now, but I'm going to sites outside of my home.
Okay.
And somebody said, you need to check, and I'm like, okay.
So I thought I saw in your application that you were thinking 6 to 8 people per week. Are you talking about 6 to...
Maybe.
What's that?
Maybe.
Oh, understood. Yes, obviously the market's got to find you. But are you talking about 6 to 8 people coming at one time
Yes.
for a class?
Yes, for a
Okay.
class, yeah.
Is your driveway got enough room for that many cars?
I think so, yes. Our cars would be, we have 2 cars, we would park them in our double garage, and we can easily accommodate 6 cars. And usually the people that are signing up for this are friends, so they're carpooling, it's not 8 individuals.
Okay, very good.
But I
So-
would certainly check and make sure if people, I don't think we can handle 8 cars. I know we can handle 6. And I know you cannot park on Wire Road.
That
Got
I
it.
think is the key point to make
Yeah.
sure of is, I think that we would put as a condition of approval that whatever number of people that you have come to your business, that it's limited by the number of parking spaces you have, and
Right.
you can't have customers or make arrangements to have customers come to your class if you don't have place for
The
them.
gentleman across the street has offered, if there's overflow, to let us park Frank Dutton. But I don't, I mean, if there's more than that, then I will go to them. I mean, this is supposed to be, like, not stressful.
I like
The
that.
name like Zentangle, I thought so.
Yeah,
Could I be incredibly ignorant
yes.
Sure.
and ask what Zentangle is?
It's an art method it's basically meditative doodling. And they're
Oh no, it's fine.
No, no, no,
I'm
they're-
intrigued.
they're using it as a stress releaser. Cancer survivors use it as stress relief. It's very calming. I was mortally ill several years ago and was an art major and started doing my pen and ink. It's pen and ink drawing, but it's structured patterns that you put in a confined space. So it's repetitive, and you're doing one, that's all you're focused on, is just doing that. And people love it, young and old. I should have brought an example.
Lynn found
my
us
boss has
some here on
very
the phone.
kindly, or somebody showed me
good,
what it
good,
is.
good. Who was that? You?
Lynn,
Lynn.
Lynn.
Lynn was
Yes,
Googling it.
okay.
Oh, thank you for the. I mean, I'm
It's
ignorant.
fabulous stuff. It's really
I'm,
cool.
I'm intrigued, and well, maybe.
Yeah,
so you're going to teach the classes?
I am.
Okay, on your form, you filled out that there's no employees proposed either as a resident or non-resident, and you count.
Oh, okay. Well, I
One.
thought, yeah, I'm it, yes.
Right. They
I'm
just
the only
wanted-
one, you have to be certified to do this. You know, everyone laughs, you're certifiable, Martha, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't.
I would not be hiring anybody else it would be me.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that was clear in terms of the application. So, for the purposes of what we're considering, we'll amend the form you filled out to put one in there. Does other members of the board have any questions for the
Did you
applicant?
get the pictures of the driveway?
I have one picture of your driveway.
Okay.
Yes,
All
we
right.
did.
It doesn't really show the complete driveway, but it shows a good amount of space where
I gave
I would
them
think at least
like
4 or 5 cars could park.
12
Yeah,
pictures, so
Mr.
you
Chair,
could
we
see.
do have all of them. To save the toner, we didn't copy everything, but
Okay.
we do have the file up here if you guys do want to see every other
Okay.
picture she provided. She provided a massive amount, so.
Okay. Thanks, Rob. Dan, you had a
Yeah.
question?
Just real quick, Ms. Brooks, on your application, you said your home was
That's a lot of space.
5,500 square feet, but our records show 2,360 square feet. I'm just
Oh, I'm
curious.
probably counting the garage.
Well, that's a huge garage. I'm wondering why.
Well, it's 30 by 50 times 2.5.
Yeah, but that's over
No.
3,000 square feet more.
Okay.
I'm just wondering why you would put 5,500.
I don't know. I mean, I'm
She's
not
an
a
art
math
major, not a math major.
I'm an artist.
I mean, I'm just curious because it
No.
seems like a lot of space, and it doesn't seem
Well,
like the
there's
application's correct.
half of downstairs, which would be the studio, and then the garage. And then there's a full second floor, and then there's 2/3 of the third floor.
Okay. So
And the
Dan has
frame
picked up.
is 30
yeah.
by
Yep.
50.
I get what you're
footprint.
saying. I'm
Yeah.
just
Dan's picked up on a topic that the staff also picked up on in their memo that they wrote to us with a recommendation. So our regulations for home occupations limit the amount of space you can use for a home occupation.
Okay.
What is it, 25% of the?
Yes, it is.
The
of
gross living area.
Gross living area.
Yep.
So the staff's memo indicates the gross living area of your home is 2,360 square feet, and I assume that comes from the tax records?
Yes.
Robert?
Okay.
with that in mind, you would be limited to a home occupation of 590 square feet, which is still quite a lot of space.
So it's like, is that like 19 by 20? I can't do that in my.
Oh, no, that's more.
20 by 20 is 400 square feet, so,
it's
yes.
bigger than that.
Yeah, it's a bit bigger than that.
That's, they're staying downstairs.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to clean, like a lot.
No, understood. Okay, so that's another area of your application that we'll have to get those numbers corrected.
Okay, yeah.
So we'll get that corrected to, the home is 2,360, which gives you a maximum space for it of 590. Does that make sense?
Yes.
590 is an awful lot of space.
Okay.
Other comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, should we make a motion to allow
Hang on a
this?
second.
I just wanted to get an understanding of how many classes you'd have per week. So you say 6 to 8 per week, but
I've gone, in the month of January, I've had a whopping 2, and they're not on site. I am just starting this. I have not done anything at my house until I came here. But people have called, like, when? I'm like, so I don't know, but I teach over at NCC, and I'm also a speech pathologist and work part-time for Nashua School District. So this is like something I'm doing for my happiness, not like my whole life.
so would it be?
So I would say probably 1 to 2 classes per week, and that's being really hopeful.
Okay, and is it a Monday through Friday, or does it include the weekends?
Say that again?
Is it a Monday through Friday, or does it include the weekends?
I think it's whatever the people want. I'm real, like
So
it's
you're
during the
open for
day
that.
or
Yes,
it's
it
at
does
night.
include the weekends.
Does include the
But
weekends.
it
We just
would
want to
be-
put that on your application.
Okay.
Just
Oh
gonna-
my, I really did a great job, didn't I, guys?
You got a good start.
Hey, come on.
No, that's no
Okay.
problem. Hours of operation, weekends. So I saw that you are not proposing any signage.
No.
If that changes and you do decide that you want to sign in, you've got to go through the department and make sure that it meets the regulations.
No,
Those
it's
are pretty strict for home
residential.
occupations.
I don't need like for sale might be the only signage that
When you decide that you're done.
Yeah.
But you can put who you're voting for up in your yard too. That probably won't help
Exactly.
with the stress at all, though.
right, but no.
That part. Other comments or questions? No. Are there any abutters?
There is a handicap bathroom down there too, so I don't know if
Oh,
that.
very good. It isn't required, but I'm sure that it'll be helpful if you have a client who needs it.
Yeah.
Are there any abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in before the board decides what to do with the home occupation? Come on forward. You gotta come forward to a microphone
And sign in.
and sign in. And Ms. Brooks, you need to sign in too.
I did, but the pen is gone.
Hi, I
So-
just moved in next door to you.
Oh, hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So my only question was plans for the future.
First,
name-
turn the microphone
Gotta
on.
tell who you
Bright
are
green.
and all that. Be
I
original.
just had a question. I didn't want to like.
No, the button right there.
That button right there.
Hi,
That works.
Now, what's your name?
Dan Miller.
Hi,
You
Dan.
don't have to hold
Seems
that.
like Wire Road is, we got a bunch of winners, don't we?
I don't know, just met you, but hey. My only question was in the future, I just don't want to be living next to like a parking lot. I didn't know
No.
what you were planning as far as that
No.
goes. And then the signage was another concern I had, so I just didn't know what your plans were for the
Yeah,
future.
no, it's like happy stuff. It's not.
Well, then you might see me there.
Okay, good. It's
all I-
really good stuff. It really is. It's fun.
That's all I had. I still need to sign in for this?
Yes,
Yes,
thank you,
please.
Dan. Okay. Anyone else wish to weigh in? Okay. So I think, Ms. Brooks, before we take up a motion by the board to decide what to do with your application, I just wanted to comment that the things that you do day to day with your business have to be in conformance with what you've put in your application in terms of the hours and the number of people and the parking,
Right.
employees and all of that stuff. If you expand in any way beyond what you proposed, you need to come back to the department, let them know what's
Okay.
going on, and see if it fits. There's not really a whole lot of expansion that can fit because your parking will outgrow your driveway or outside employees.
Well,
or
I did like 21 people, but I did it at home health and hospice.
good.
If it's more than what this
That makes
can
a lot of sense.
handle, you provide the spot. And
Yeah, makes a lot of
So-
sense to me. Okay.
it will not be, and I think probably it'll be like 2 or 3.
I wish you all the luck in the world. What's the will of the board with respect to disposition of the application?
Do you want to know, do we have to accept it for review? Probably not.
No, it just says,
I make a motion that we grant Ms. Brooks the opportunity to have a home occupation business in her home in 82 Wire Road, subject to the conditions that have been amended under your direction during the course of the meeting.
is there a second for Alistair's motion? Second. Paul's got second. Any discussion?
That includes the 6 to 8 people per class and 1 to 2 classes per week?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. Come join us.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 700. So you're all approved. You'll get a letter from the town with the details of what you've got to do to finalize the paperwork.
I send you guys
Thank you.
well, a thank you, of course, but do you want, like, to know what
You
I'm doing?
never know your luck.
You might want to come to a class.
You're dead right about now.
May very well.
No.
Item 6 on our agenda is the Southwood Corporation as the applicant and owner review for acceptance and consideration of a subdivision plan review. Subdivision. The parcel is located at 29 Manchester Street in the I-1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts. It's tax map 2D Lot 4. Robert, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
No, you can open the presentation up.
All right. Jim, good to see you again.
Chairman, good to see everybody.
Please introduce yourself, even though we know you well.
Sure,
And
for the record, my name is Jim Petropoulos. I'm a civil engineer with Hayner Swanson, doing business at 3 Congress Street in Nashville. Tonight representing the Southwood Corporation.
Jim, I can't tell whether your microphone's not close enough.
Yeah, I'm on. Sorry. I should know better. Sitting next to me is Don Ware. Don is the Chief Operating Officer of Pennachuck Waterworks. And of course, as I think everybody knows, the Southwood Corporation is a subsidiary company, thank you, Don, of Pennachuck. I would like to thank the chair and thank the applicant still in the room for the change of order tonight. I appreciate that. As just read into the record, we're seeking a simple 1 lot into 2 subdivision for property located at 29 Manchester Street. I'll do a very quick presentation of the facts, and then Don and I will be happy to answer any questions you might have. The subject lot is located on the west side of Manchester Street, and actually the property is just north of the Heron Cove residential development, and of course just south of the Heron Cove Office Park, right here. And it's a rather unique shaped property that also borders Pennachuck Brook to the west. The land has frontage on the Alpaw Lane extension, the part of Alpaw Lane that's not paved. And then the property also has frontage on Manchester Street. This particular lot, map 2D Lot 4, measures 27.23 acres in size and is located in the I-1 Industrial District. Some features about this particular property. It contains a rather nice pond located here near Alpaw Lane. The public pump station for this part of town and for the Heron Cove Office Park is located here. There's a public sewer line through the property. The famed Simmons Rock is located along the sewer route, if you're familiar with that. And the property contains a self-imposed, restricted 300-foot buffer along Pennachuck Brook. Now, a number of your members may recall in 2007, Don and I appeared before you for a full site plan approval and application for this property, and it actually was permitted a 110,000 square foot office building and 471 parking spaces. And that building was really themed after the first 3 Heron Cove buildings located here at the corner. You may also recall shortly after that approval, the market crashed. The building wasn't built. But a tenant came forth for 25 Manchester Street with a very high parking demand, in excess of almost 7 spaces per 1,000 at the time. And I think it was Fidelity, Don, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And so Southwood Corporation constructed about 215 parking spaces, and that's what you're seeing here in yellow. That was consistent with the approved site plan, but it was really there for purposes of supporting the Heron Cove office complex, Heron Cove office buildings. Since the construction benefited these 2 buildings, and there has been no building built upon 2D Lot 4, there's a number of easements for utilities, for access and parking that exist between this property and between the Heron Cove properties. What we've put forth tonight, Mr. Chairman, is an application simply to subdivide the 27 acres into 2 parcels. Map 2D 4-7 will essentially include the parking spaces. Here, the balance of the property, Lot 4, will be 23 acres in size, and it will include everything else. Why are we doing this? What is the reason for doing this? The smaller lot, the parking lot, will be retained in ownership by the Southwood Corporation, and it will continue to service for parking for the Heron Cove office buildings. The balance of the property will be conveyed to Pennachuck Waterworks, and it will be used as watershed land, protected land, conservation land, so there won't be a building built upon that particular property. As I think you know, the city of Nashua is the single stockholder of Pennachuck Waterworks, the single shareholder. And I think their policy has been since that to protect the watershed and protect some of the unbuilt upon properties. And so it's a simple subdivision of 1 into 2. Southwood will retain the parking, and then this land will become a conservation lot, not to be built upon. Our application, Mr. Chairman, included a single waiver request. We asked for a waiver of section 4.03 of the Merrimack subdivision records for a complete topographic survey of the property. The reason for the request is the nature of the application, a simple 1 into 2, didn't warrant a complete survey of the entire 27 acres. And also the previous approved plan for this property back in 2007 did show all those particular features. So we think that the waiver meets the spirit and intent and of the ordinance by a professional plan being prepared for you, telling the story, and that it would be somewhat of a hardship, time, effort, and money to topo survey that entire property. So in summary, we believe the application is complete. We have seen the staff report, the recommended conditions of approval, and they're comfortable, we're fine with those conditions. And Don and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have at this time.
Do members of the board have some questions or want to entertain some discussion before deciding whether the application is complete? Is the board prepared to consider the question of whether the application is complete?
I make a motion.
Desiree has a motion
Yes,
to
approve the application as, I'm sorry. You accept the application, sorry, as substantially complete.
second by Alistair Milnes. Any other discussion? All in favor of finding the application complete, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 7-0-0 to find that the application's complete. So Jim, I had a couple of questions based on what you had presented. What year, 2007 was when the approval came for this other building
Yes.
that never got built on there?
Yes.
Okay, so obviously this subdivision is going to render that previously approved site plan no longer valid or no longer actionable. And I would assume that we can include that in one of the notes or a condition of approval, that would be clear, just so there's no questions about that. The conservation land or the use of the land as conservation by Pennachuck, is that going to be designated by some legally binding restriction, an easement, or a dedication to a conservation agency or something like that?
I'm going to let Mr. Ware answer that one, Mr. Chairman.
At this time, no, there was not an intent other than the fact is to join it to the adjoining Pennachuck Waterworks land. If the board was more comfortable with it, I could go back and seek that information from the board, but the whole purpose here is to ensure that this land is never developed. And you know, so wanted to make sure that was the understanding.
I think I welcome the idea that the lot won't be developed, and I'm glad to hear that. But I'm just wondering, what's the actionable legal document that makes that happen? Whether that's part of a condition of approval here, because otherwise the lot, as we approve the subdivision, it's got frontage, it's got upland area, it's a buildable lot as it stands, unless there's some limitation placed upon it as a part of either a restriction, an easement, grant to a conservation entity or some restriction that we put on it as a planning board to say it's no longer a buildable lot. Is there any objection if there's that kind of condition put on it? I know that the intent is to have it in conservation, but if you don't put that requirement, then 10 years, 20 years, people can change their mind.
Yeah, I do not believe there is any objection to that. And the reason I say that is I'm not sure that I'm empowered to act on behalf of the board. I'm sure if I took it back to the board, I can get a vote that would accept that restriction.
Okay. I mean, if it's one that we vote on tonight and impose it, then
You
you don't have to accept it, but if you want to change it, you got to come back and argue.
It would
why.
be incumbent upon us to
Why
come
we
back.
would
Yeah.
do something differently.
I like that approach, yeah.
So I was curious about the shape of the drainage easement over the
Sure.
larger remainder lot, especially as it relates to where the drainage easement is overlapping what looks like a utility or sewer easement.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, in 2009, this 215 space parking lot was constructed. And it was constructed in the same theme as the approved plan. And the approved plan essentially used a system of curbing and catch basins to capture this stormwater, pipe it into a stormwater management area, and then discharge it through a culvert through the sewer easement into a receiving swale associated with the pond. So we couldn't build 215 spaces without having a stormwater management system to accommodate that. So physically, the stormwater area was built and the outlet was constructed. So when Don approached us about performing this 1 into 2, we said we're going to need to blanket part of lot 4 with the easement that keeps, it retains the right, it conveys an easement to this property to drain onto it and then ultimately through the site. So it's a physical feature that has been constructed. All this is natural wooded here, as is the front, but the part of the site where the building was intended to be was actually cleared and graded, and it's starting to renovate itself back to forest. But that stormwater area was built, and that's why we're covering it in an easement.
So where that stormwater area crosses over the sewer easement, is that?
It's a physical pipe, correct?
It's a physical pipe. Are those two in an appropriate configuration where you've got enough coverage over the sewer pipe and all of that?
Yeah, in fact, I received a comment from Ken Conate today about the same question. I immediately fired off a fax to him showing that pipe over the easement, and Ken got back saying, yeah, good, thanks.
Okay, sounds good. I think Don Tuamala, our town engineer, is asking the same question. And,
yeah.
Part of our approval would be subject to satisfying whatever conditions that she's got.
Correct.
Our concerns about the project. I don't have any other questions or comments off the top of my head. I don't know if other members of the board do.
Yeah.
Nelson?
Yeah, question, with regard to lot 4-4-7, those parking spaces and all were built, was that part of the approved plan that was for that lot, or how did that get built without an approved plan, or is there an approved plan?
Yeah, it was a part of the approved plan in 2007.
Okay, the approved
Yeah.
plan for the building that didn't get built.
Correct. That parking would have supported that building.
Okay, that's
Yep.
what, yeah.
Yeah.
I just
In
wanted to
fact,
understand.
if memory serves me right, I can remember either coming back here or somehow getting a blessing that we were going to build a portion of that parking lot for the benefit of 25 Manchester Street, because we were only building a portion of our site plan. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted, didn't remember that.
Have you committed to those parking easements for those two buildings? Those are no longer within Southwood's control, right? The Heron Cove office buildings?
This will remain in Southwood Corporation's control. The balance of the property will be conveyed to Pennachuck Water.
But does Heron Cove Office Park hold a
No.
parking easement
Yes,
to
there's-
use those spaces?
There's actually easements all over the place, and they're actually blanketed for access parking and utilities, yes.
Okay. With respect to the larger lot that's going to be put into conservation, you've got some structures already in there, and so your conservation's got to accommodate the maintenance of the sewer line, the maintenance of the drainage area, and I think there's also some more utility easements down towards the southeast
Correct.
part of it. And so it's conservation except for whatever's necessary to
Yep.
maintain and operate those
The
things.
sewer is a public sewer easement, so that's a town-maintained easement. It's got that wonderful path above it, okay?
Yeah.
This is a water line easement that provides water to Heron Cove, so that will remain. In fact, the easement next to it was to relocate the water, but it was never done.
Yeah.
And you're correct about the stormwater easement. Don's lawyers are putting together the do's and the don'ts of that easement. There will be an easement deed put on record about maintenance.
Okay. I know that we've had some applications from Southwood or Pennachuck or both to run some pipelines cross-country to get behind Budweiser and access the river and do various things like that. Is that anywhere involved in this lot, or is that in a different spot?
No, that's in a different spot. That's actually on the eastern side of DW Highway, heading down Mast Road, down towards the sewer treatment plant, and over down to where our raw water pumping station is and across the Merrimack in that area.
Okay. But didn't it have a connection to something on this side of DW?
No, it was coming off the 24-inch main in the DW Highway.
Oh, I
it
got
was
you.
on
That's what it was.
It was on the west. The 24-inch is on the west side of, in the right of way at DW Highway. So we'll be crossing underneath the DW, west to east, and then down, like I said, down Mast Road, replacing the main that's
Okay,
there.
I got you. But that has nothing to do with this. Different parcel, different property. No interconnection with it. Other comments or questions by members of the board? Seeing none.
We have to have a waiver, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman. I'd like to make a motion that we grant the waiver from section 4.06.3 of our subdivision regulations, which would otherwise require a topographic subdivision plan on the basis that it's a very large site and there's not much to see, that strict conformity would pose an unnecessary hardship to the applicant, and the waiver will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of that regulation.
Is there a second for Alistair's motion? Desiree has seconded it. Any discussion? All in favor of granting the waiver, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 7-0-0 to grant the waiver. Are there any abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in on this? I'm sorry, what? Desiree had the second, I'm sorry. Any abutters? Okay, so we'll close the public hearing. What's the will of the board with respect to final disposition of the application?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we grant the subdivision plan, accept the subdivision plan as proposed by the Southwood Corporation, subject to any conditions that may come from the memo dated January the 10th, 2018 from Kelly Shamel.
And as discussed here tonight.
Yep.
And yes, oh yeah, and we will want that. We are going to put a condition that if that land has to be conserved, and if anybody wants to commit, you're going to have to come back and talk to us.
I'm not even sure it should be eligible for coming back and talk to us if it's in conservation. It's in conservation.
It's in conservation. That's the end of story.
Is there a second for Alistair's motion? Second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 7-0-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, have fun.
Nice seeing you, Jim.
Now to the main event, one that everybody's here to see and talk about tonight.
It's been so long.
Thanks, Jim. Item 4 on our agenda is Merrimack Parcel A, LLC, as the applicant and owner. Review for acceptance and consideration of final approval of a site plan application for 372,800 square feet of development, including retail, hotel, event center, restaurant, office, multifamily residential uses, and associated parking and draining improvements in accordance with the Merrimack Park Place mixed-use conditional use permit. The parcel is located at 10 Premium Outlets Boulevard in the I-2 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts and Wellhead Protection Area. It is Tax Map 3C, Lot 191-2, and it is continued from our January 2nd, 2018 Planning Board meeting. Robert, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
No, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. And this familiar face, I'm sure, will be happy to introduce himself again to us and tell us what's on the plan.
Mr. Chairman. While we're waiting for the AV Club to get their act together, my name is Gordon Leedy, and I am a landscape architect and planner with VHB representing Parcel A LLC at what's known as 10 Premium Outlets Boulevard in your fine town. Okay, so we're good. Let me. Uh-oh, where's my? Pardon me? I had it all set up, but, you know, the best laid plans.
Take your time, no rush.
Oh, here we go.
That's beautiful.
Okay. So, there we go. Very good. So we are here, as you may recall, about a year ago, we were, after having visited the zoning board and receiving several variances that allowed us to pursue a conditional use permit for a mixed-use development on the on lot 3C 190-1. We were before you just about a year ago to pursue that conditional use permit, and that was granted maybe 2 days short of a year ago today. So that, just to give you the context, the property is at the corner of Continental Boulevard and Industrial Drive, accessed from Premium Outlets Boulevard, which is the access up to the outlet mall, and across from Contra Way, or I'm sorry, Spartan Way, which is the main access into Fidelity Investments. It's about a 20-acre site. This is the plan that was signed as a part of the CUP application. It's a bit different than what we initially had talked about, in that we had moved some of the uses around in response to some of what we heard here relative to uses up against the primarily the Spruce Road Sergeant Acres neighborhood. So what we're presenting tonight is phase one of this this proposed plan. And at a glance, the overall program was 97,770 square feet of office, 44,800 square feet split between retail and restaurant use, 120 room hotel, 192 units of residential, in a mixture of studio, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. Those will be market rate rental units. An event center of 7,500 square feet, and we talked about phasing the development at the time of the conditional use permit. We received a couple of waivers during that process, or conditions, if you will. One was that we talked about using a shared parking analysis, which is part of, I'll lead you through this evening what we came up with. That shared parking analysis was developed by Urban Land Institute and is an accepted way of calculating parking when you have these kinds of mixed-use developments, so that you don't have too many parking spaces. The traffic generated by this ultimate development is not markedly different than what is there today. It's about 640 additional weekday PM peak hour trips, and about 600 additional Saturday midday trips. Overall, it's about almost $50 million in assessed value, with revenue of about a little over $1 million to the town in taxes. The fiscal impact study showed a positive fiscal impact, and one of the things that you were concerned about when we discussed the phasing was that as the project goes forward, that the fiscal impact remain positive throughout. So it's not just a one type of use out of the many that we're proposing, and then sort of go away. So the idea is to keep this mixed use, keep it positive from a fiscal standpoint. So this is the plan that we submitted in this application, and I'll show you a little bit of a blow-up of it, but I wanted to show you the entire property. This has, I wonder if I can do something fancy. A laser pointer. Okay, look at that. So this is the intersection of Premium Outlets Boulevard with Industrial Drive. It is the only access to this 175-acre parcel. We do have an emergency access up by Camp Sargent Road, but that is gated and is anticipated to remain so. We've discussed this at some length with the fire department and think we have a solution that they concurred with. As you come in to Premium Outlets Boulevard, we have a roundabout, which Robin Bauza is here to speak to a little bit later. There's a main entrance that comes in, and we have this oval or plaza area, green space that is surrounded by a kind of more urban feel than what we had presented previously. The idea is, if you've been to Portsmouth, the model here is kind of a modified version of Port Walk, with retail and commercial uses on the ground floors, and residences or offices above. In this case, we have a hotel in this building with an event center on the ground floor and a small amount of retail. We have retail on the ground floor of this building with 2 floors of office above. We have retail on the ground floor of this building with 2 floors or 3 floors of rental apartments above. Parking for this will be largely in the southwest corner of the site. That's the site of the eventual phase 2. So when the large office user shows up, then we'll build a building and then do structured parking to replace the parking that's disturbed. But at this point, the economics of the deal don't support structured parking. The residential uses are clustered in the rear, adjacent to the residential neighborhood. We have maintained, as we said we would, the 100-foot naturally vegetated buffer in that location. So that exceeds all of your standards for either commercial or industrial use up against a residential use in terms of buffer requirements. As I said, this access, emergency access, we've discussed with the fire department. They were pretty clear that they wanted essentially exclusive access to that for staging equipment and manpower in the event of an incident either on this site or up the hill. So this is essentially a dedicated lane. There is some small service like trash access off of it, but basically there will be no traffic on that lane, and it's for the exclusive use of emergency vehicles. There is a breakaway gate in this location that would allow for evacuation through this if an incident were to occur and things got jammed up on Premium Outlets Boulevard. But we view that as a pretty remote possibility. So the idea is to keep all of the building activity away from the existing neighborhood with a significant natural buffer and then additional landscaped areas between the development and the neighborhood. We also have located the quietest uses toward that neighborhood. So, and the idea is that this is an internally focused plan, and I could show you something with a little bit more green on it, which is attractive to me. So we have this central green. We have a small building that might be a restaurant or a small retail facility that might enjoy access to the outside. as a focal point, and then wide sidewalks on either side, on-street parking in that central area, both around the Oval and along this street, which is the main access for the hotel property, so that it really reads like a street, a more urban type atmosphere. Let's see. In terms of the parking, there is. Let me just. Well, I'll go over the program quickly. This phase one is envisioned to include 42,000 square feet of office, 44,800 square feet of retail and restaurant, roughly split evenly between the two, 120 room hotel, 192 units of residential, and the 7,500 square foot event center. Now, there has been some question raised in the staff memo that you might have noticed that said that we haven't presented any additional phasing. I can assure you that this will be phased. It's not all going to happen at once, so we can go over that in just a moment. And this has this concept shows 900 parking spaces, and I'll get into how we arrived at that number in a moment. So here's an aerial view, if you will, bird's eye view of the development. This is the main entrance in from industrial or from Premium Outlet Boulevard. This is the residential with this face being ground floor retail. This is ground floor retail and office above, and then this is the hotel with some retail in the event center down below. And the idea, as you can imagine, is to create this very attractive central open space that becomes the focal point for the development, both in this arrangement here, as well as a dedicated central open space that serves as kind of a courtyard for the residential component. A street level view of the office building on this side and the hotel on the other, with that small sort of kiosk type retail or restaurant use in the middle. And the idea is to have a plaza that would allow vehicular connection there, because the hotel is going to want that, and but will read more like a pedestrian precinct. Here's another view of the hotel building, showing a porte cochere, which is actually on the street. It's very much like the arrangement that they have in Portsmouth at Port Walk. So the plan again is to have, as I said, on-street parking on these streets in the main portion of the development. Have surface parking at the perimeter, a fairly large open parking lot on the southwest, and then a dedicated parking under those residential buildings. So there's one level of essentially at grade or perhaps a little bit below grade parking, but it's not going to be completely below grade. We'll have a lobby space and then apartments above. The way the shared parking works is that we need to, this is kind of an eye chart, but
kind of.
we take all of the individual uses, and there's a as the result of surveys that ULI has undertaken. They've surveyed a number of different kinds of mixed-use developments and determined what the actual demand is for each different kind of use. So we take the parking demand generation, and then there's a time of day calculation as well. So, retail, for example, may pick up in the middle of the day and toward the afternoon, but is very quiet at night when they're not open. Conversely, residential may be quieter during the day and loads up at night when people are sleeping. So you can share those parking spaces. And what happens is you have a time of day, you have a utilization rate, which comes from, as I said, survey information, It's broken down by weekday and Saturday, and this down at the bottom is just a blow up of the left-hand side of that spreadsheet. Then for office, we have employee parking demand, we have visitor parking demand, and you do all of this by time of day and by seasonality. And then you sum it all up at the end, and you come up with a number. And the number that we came up with was 786 parking spaces that are required for the uses that we have on the site. It's important to note that for the residential component, 1 space per unit, or 192 of those 786 spaces, are not shared. So they're dedicated to the residential use so that everybody has at least 1 parking space available to them at all times. And that, again, was a recommendation from the ULI folks. And just to be safe, it's a little unclear whether when ULI is talking about spaces, whether they're talking about demand or recommended supply. And the difference is that you always want to have more than what is demanded, because otherwise you keep people circulating looking for that one empty space. So we like to use 10% as a number there. And so as you can see, we've got about 120 spaces or 114 spaces more than on the plan, more than what is strictly speaking required by the ULI analysis. And so we're confident that this is going to be adequate parking for the development. As we go forward in phase 2, what we would do is we would then, create a structure. There's kind of a dance that's going to need to take place, because we're going to have to take out some of the parking to build a parking deck, and then you build the parking deck large enough to accommodate all of the uses on the site that you're taking out the you're adding use and you're taking out parking, so you have to accommodate it all. It's going to be a while before market rents support that kind of activity, frankly. But we think that this is a very viable and reasonable way to come up with parking. You'll note that it's only about 125 spaces less than what would be required if we took the sum of all of the uses and added up your standard parking requirements. So I was a little surprised by that, but the numbers are what they are. And it varies with all of the different configurations you might have in a mixed-use development. So at this point, I think what I'd like to do is have Robin come up and talk about, there you are, talk about parking, or talk about access and traffic.
Robin Bowser, I'm the Managing Director of VHB's Bedford, New Hampshire office. Did you see how nervous he got when he thought I left? But he loves to talk traffic. So I thought tonight what might be good for the board is just to take a 60-second recap of the traffic journey we've been on for Premium Outlets Boulevard. I know several of you planning board members have been through this entire journey with us for the last decade. But for those of you that are new and haven't been with us from the beginning, when we started looking at building out the outlet malls, we made a conscious decision that we were going to permit traffic and build off-site mitigation for everything that could possibly be built off of it. And the reason we did that was so that when the projects came along, like this one tonight, we weren't continuously building off-site mitigation and interrupting flow on the public street system. So if you recall, back in 2007, we did a really extensive traffic study. We looked at all of Exit 11, Exit 10, multiple intersections on Route 3, as well as on Continental Boulevard. And we did the appropriate mitigation, got our DOT permit on all of those roadways. So fast forward to 2016, as Gordon mentioned, when Tom's property came online and we started looking at it, we said, well, this is really a good opportunity to go out there and do some traffic counts, check in and see how we did with our forecasting, and make sure that all of the things we thought were going to work are going to continue to work with this additional development. The original permitting included, I just wanted to note, Phase 1 and 2 for the outlet centers. You know, only Phase 1 is built today, so there's still a Phase 2 left to build out there, as well as the 2 out parcels, the one that's also constructed up the road already. So in 2016, we did some traffic counts. We checked in on our traffic forecasting. We found that the numbers with this proposed development program were really still right in line with exactly where we thought we would be with the build-out scenario for all of the properties. We also took the opportunity in 2016 to rerun some analysis with some updated traffic volumes on the local street system, since it had been quite a while since we had actually counted traffic on Industrial Drive and Continental Boulevard. So the 2 signalized intersections on Industrial Drive at the Premium Outlets Boulevard and at Continental Drive we looked at in 2016. And found, again, with this updated development program and the full build-out of everything, we're still looking at level of service C operations there, which is good. Level of service is like a report card, A to F, and so C is really a good traffic operation for those peak hours. And I'll note that we pushed that forecasting to 2027, so we're even still looking 10 more years into the future to make sure things are still going to work well. In 2016 was where we actually introduced the idea of the hybrid roundabout at the site driveway, which you see on the site plan tonight. This roundabout is very, very similar to what you see on the Fidelity campus, and the reason being that we sort of struggling with the same challenges we were when we looked at the Fidelity campus, where you've got generators here that are generating quite a bit of traffic. They're not low-volume generators, but at the same time, it's a private roadway. It's not a public highway. So you want to be promoting slower travel speeds, promote some traffic calming, and really actually try to control how traffic is driving on the roadway. When you look at a single lane roundabout, and Alistair's our expert on this, lower volumes, lower speeds, right? You tend to see those in sort of neighborhoods and things like that. The 2-lane roundabouts, higher volume, higher capacity, higher speeds, right? So you tend to see those on more arterial types of streets. This hybrid is really the nice compromise and balance. It gives you the best of both worlds. It gives you the capacity you need to get the traffic in and out of the premium outlet center, but at the same time, it does promote some traffic calming and speed control. What we looked at here, again, full build out on all of the sites there. We're looking at that hybrid roundabout still operating at level of service A or B with the full build out of the property, which is, those are really good levels of service with the full build out scenario. We did receive some comments from the police department that were in your package, I believe, that you got from the town planner, suggesting that we might want to look at a 3rd lane being added to the roundabout, and that 3rd lane would really act sort of as a bypass to the roundabout and promote that free flow speed. The concern with doing that is now we're taking away from all the good things we're trying to do with controlling the speed and promoting some traffic calming. You know, if this is operating at level of service A, B, the way that it's being presented to you, adding the 3rd lane is really putting too much capacity on the roadway. And sometimes too much capacity is just as bad as not providing enough, because you're really encouraging higher speeds and sometimes aggressive driving. So we really don't want to go down that option of looking at a 3rd lane to the roundabout. Mr. Millen should block his ears for a second. The alternative to the hybrid roundabout would actually be...
No. No. No.
I asked you to block your ears. Leaving Premium Outlets Boulevard the way it is, 2 lanes in each direction, and just bringing the driveway from the site in as a T intersection. Now, that will work fine for Premium Outlets Boulevard because it'll just be free flow as it is today. But the reality of it is any left turns that want to come out of this site and head up to the outlet center or to the other out parcel to get their Starbucks, they operate at level of service F. They're really challenged by the volume on that 2-lane roadway coming down the hill. So they operate at a poor level of service during the peak hours. They will have, you know, a long queue within the site waiting to get out. And then we also have concerns that crossing 2 lanes of traffic is hard. You guys know that. You know, you've got Daniel Webster Highway here, so you see some of that. It's a difficult situation. So the hybrid sort of accomplishes minimizing that that conflict and giving the traffic coming out of the site the ability to take a right out of the site to go up the hill, make it a little bit easier for them. So that would be the alternative to it. Again, we actually like the roundabout alternative. I think it actually is going to operate better. Under the T condition, we don't expect that would ever meet signal warrants. So we're looking at that probably remaining unsignalized for its life term.
So Robin,
Yep.
walk me through what you mean by a hybrid roundabout.
Okay, so can you blow that up at all? A little bit, maybe?
Boy.
Okay, I won't challenge you. So,
I think I can.
R1.
Control plus.
Well,
Yeah, that,
now we got nothing.
yeah, no, I got to go somewhere else.
Okay, I'll start talking though. So hybrid, I mean by a single lane roundabout, you familiar with that? It's one lane approaching in each direction and one lane circulating all the way around. A two-lane roundabout is the same thing, but two lanes coming in on each direction and circulating all the way around. The hybrid is two lanes coming in on the main line and circulating straight through to each other. But where you have the left turn going into the site or the left turn coming out of the site, there's only one lane circulating. So it minimizes the level of conflict where instead of two lanes are coming around the roundabout, merging with two lanes coming in from each approach, it's only one lane circulating around the roundabout.
Show me that in a picture, because I can see the people that are going in toward, I know that, but how does it work? So the traffic that's coming into the outlet mall, if there's two lanes that are going around the roundabout and continuing up to the mall, that's pretty easy to see and understand how that works.
Mhm.
If you're bringing two lanes down from the mall, past where you're gonna merge from the traffic from the site, that's where I'm not really sure how this works.
Those
and how
both-
this works effectively.
Both lanes entering the roundabout coming southbound on Premium Outlets Boulevard has to yield to the circulating traffic in the roundabout. So they would both have to stop if there were a left turn traffic going into the site. Everyone entering the roundabout yields.
Everyone entering
I mean, this doesn't have any lane geometry on it, but, so what happens is that, if I get my pointer, you have,
Can't do both.
no, you can't do both. All right, well, I can use the hand, so, talk to the hand. So, the inside lane can go around, or it can go through. The outside lane can only go through. That's why it's a hybrid, because really, this section in the, connecting the two sides of the roundabout, if you will,
Yep.
are really only one, or really only one lane.
Premium Outlets Boulevard remains two lanes in each direction.
Right, but the south from the top of the hill, they're not restricted to just going through. They can go over into your
They
new
can
development.
go, they can go off into this development, or they can go through, but the same thing applies. The center lane can go, the right lane, the outside lane cannot cross. That's the issue. I mean, you can exit, but you can't cross. You can't be in the outside lane here and go.
And go back up the hill.
Back up the hill.
Why would they want to?
Exactly.
Exactly. That's why we don't let them.
That's why it works.
I get it, but that just, to me, that just sounds like a two-lane roundabout. Why is this not a two-lane roundabout?
Because there's only one lane that cuts through.
Because there's only one lane that cuts through.
Yep.
It's kind of if you look at the striping on the Fidelity property, it's kind of an oval. It's not a circle. The pavement striping, lane demarcation is not a circle. It's an oval. So like at these connection points, the striping kind of necks you down to one lane, even though it's a little bit wider because you need that width to handle trucks, right? So, but we use pavement markings to control where the vehicles are.
All right. And when we were here for the CUP and we were hearing from some of the neighbors, they had some concern as you're on Premium Outlets Boulevard and kind of coming into the new development site as the traffic kind of makes that turn.
Here.
That the headlight sweep goes off towards the residential properties. And I know that we were talking before about both trees and berms and other kinds of barriers and ways to control and make sure that didn't happen. And
There's an
also some
existing
element
berm.
of geography.
Yeah, there's
I
an
mean,
existing berm with
topography.
vegetation that regrettably is not shown here. But, there's heavy planting all along this berm. That was part of the Premium Outlets project. We are proposing to augment that with basically a sign location that will be built into that berm. So we're not going to reduce the berm. We actually may make it a little bit higher and plant plant some evergreens and ornamentals around that sign. In addition, there's an existing 5-6 foot berm over here. Like this area of the berm is actually, I'm guessing here, but it's probably 15 feet tall. I mean,
I
it's very
can't
tall.
see where here
Yeah,
is.
we're.
Yeah, they
I'm saying
can't-
here
You
is
can't
this.
see, oh, wait,
Yeah,
it's
I
because
don't
I
do
don't have my
anything on the
pointer.
screen up here.
He's
All right,
using his
there
pointer.
it is.
Oh, there
This
it is.
part of the berm here is maybe 15, 16 feet tall.
Okay.
This part of the berm here is 5-6 feet tall. And it has planting on top of it, which has grown over, the last 10 years that it's been in. This has pretty significant landscaping on it that is, a mixture of trees and shrubs. And my goal would be not to disturb that. Now, but while we're on the subject of buffers, I know that again, the police department noted in their comments that what they suggested we do is build a 20-foot high berm all along that edge. I would suggest to you that replacing a 100-foot wide naturally vegetated buffer with a 20-foot high berm that we then have to plant on top of would be inadvisable and would be less effective than what's there today. Just my thought. And so what we are open to doing is, I've taken a crack at determining where the headlights are likely to wind up and augmenting the landscaping that's at the edge of that existing vegetated buffer appropriately. If you think we need to do more, then we can certainly take a look at adding to that. But I would strongly encourage the board to consider letting us keep whatever vegetation is there today there. In this area here, there is a drainage feature that is it's a gravel wetland, so we are kind of limited in what we can do right there, which is in part why I suggested that we should plant the back edge of it pretty extensively. Are we done with traffic? Are you done with traffic?
So,
Well, I mean, we can have further discussions, but I have a little bit more than I wanted to talk about.
there may be some other members of the board that want to talk about that, but Robin, were you also here to talk about parking too, or just the traffic?
Just the traffic.
Okay.
The other thing that we're planning on doing, which we'll need a little bit of cooperation from the town on, is we are proposing to do, I believe it was at the board's request, a sidewalk system that is somewhat detached from Industrial Drive and from Continental Boulevard. And the reason that I'm suggesting that is that those are both pretty intimidating roadways. So if we were to do the standard kind of New England approach, which is like little bitty curb and a 5-foot asphalt sidewalk, I would suggest to you that it would get very little use because it would feel,
Scary.
pretty scary to be walking on it. So our approach is to do a series of walkways that ring the perimeter of the site. It comes very close to the pavement here, so that if we wanted to do a crosswalk, I'm not sure that there's much demand there because there isn't a sidewalk on the other side, but if we wanted to do a crosswalk at some future date across Continental Boulevard, we could potentially do that. Again, here, this is approximately where Greens Pond Road is. We could do the same thing if if it was the town's pleasure to do so. And then this goes up and connects with Camp Sargent Road. The other thing that we're showing is a walkway adjacent to the emergency access road, I believe, again, at the board's request, that parallels that emergency access road and connects Camp Sargent Road with this development as well as with the mall up the hill for pedestrian access only. So, interestingly, we just received word from DOT that they don't believe they own this property. So I think they believe that the town owns it, even though the town doesn't necessarily believe that. There's a triangle of land in this location that is the old, it's a remnant. Yeah, it's a remnant of where Camp Sargent used to be. It's not the Camp Sargent Road right-of-way, it's land that was on the other side of Camp Sargent Road and got bisected from what's now the atrium site when Continental Boulevard went in. So there's a parcel of land there that I think we all assumed that DOT owned it, and DOT actually assumed that they owned it until this project, not this project, but the mall came along. Andy O'Sullivan at Turnpikes did quite a bit of research to understand whose responsibility Continental was where, and really came to no real conclusion. But apparently, right of way, we asked the question of who owns that property and can we buy it? And they said, well, turns out that we think the town owns it. So which is, that's perfectly fine. But we'll need to seek permission from the town to gain permission to build those walkways. Incidentally, we had been examining the possibility of doing a connection out to Continental. I'm not sure that is desirable. I don't think it really helps us from a traffic standpoint because that's not where the demand is. The demand is out toward the highway, but that was that discussion was apropos of examining options.
Okay,
so it actually is in your zoning ordinance that industrial access is prohibited along this entire frontage and along this entire frontage. I guess it's an open question whether this is industrial frontage or not, or I don't know. But right now we're not going there. So it might be something to discuss in the future should the need arise. We can talk a little bit.
So on the pedestrian thing, you began that with saying that kind of hinges on some help from the town. You mean just with respect to the permissions on the...
Yep. And we have, part of the staff comments was that the developer would be responsible for maintaining, including winter maintenance, maintaining those walkways, which the developer has agreed is a good thing. So, and as I'm finding, there may not be sidewalks here today, but if we don't put them in, we're never going to have them. So, I think it's probably a good idea. And eventually, through the largesse of other landowners, you might get, sidewalk all the way up Continental Boulevard, which I think would be a fabulous thing.
I think that the distance between your site and where the next sidewalk picks up isn't so very far away, but it is in that area of Continental Boulevard where there's just a pinch point, and it's hard to figure out how you would ever get a sidewalk to be built in there.
Yeah.
And
there's no curb there either, I don't believe, on the outside. Right. I think the island is curbed, but there's no curb on the outside. So it would be expensive to build a traditional side of the road sidewalk, and as I said earlier, I don't believe that that's something we really want to do here anyway.
I agree with that. I think that it's more comfortable for pedestrians to be a little further away. It's also, I think, better for the drainage and water infiltration to have a bit of green between the pavement of the sidewalk and the pavement of the road.
Absolutely.
I think that ends up being more comfortable.
If we can talk just briefly about the architecture, we have architects in the room, so if you have any specific questions, we can certainly try to answer them. But as you can see from these renderings, this is far from vanilla box type architecture. The idea here is to do an enlivened streetscape with exciting architecture that is of varying heights and movement in the facade of the building that comports with your architectural standards. One question that came up from staff is we do have an indication on the site plan in this location here that says tent. And that is a space for a tent, for an event. If we wanted to, if somebody wanted to have a wedding outside or, whatever they like to do in tents, that's a space for it to happen. Arabian Nights, perhaps. This is a rendering of the residential building along that central spine. This is ground floor retail with 4 floors of residential space above. In the other buildings, it would be ground floor parking with the 4 floors of residential above. This is the office and retail building. Again, we have retail on the street level and 2 floors of offices above. And as I indicated, this is far from vanilla box kind of, cheaping out architecture. These are going to be very striking buildings, and I think a really positive addition to the environment in Merrimack. Do we have anything else? I don't think we have anything else, so I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Hi. Can you put up the renderings, the 3D renderings that were on like the earlier portion of your
I can't.
presentation?
I have a fly-through if you want to see that.
Yeah, I do.
Do you want to see the
Yeah.
fly-through? All right, hold on.
He's got to do more magic now.
Yeah.
Careful.
Oh, yeah, right. All right, so we're
So
gonna,
the front side of the building, like the side of the buildings that are along the spine that you guys like, the more urban spine part, those are like they're the ones that have the sawtooth, and then you come around the backside and you could see like when you're coming in, you have one rendering where you're coming in on the backside of it, and it's a
box.
yeah. So when you're entering in the back of the property, it's not the back. I guess like from the residential side. If you're actually the residential still there's more articulation on the residential, but yeah, it's the back of building D that is way plain compared to the front.
I don't want that. I want this.
Vacation videos from Hawaii.
I don't want music.
Here we go.
You darn people. I blame Bill Gates. Shoot.
Should get a Mac. They're nice.
I have a Mac. This happens to be
It's
VHB's
issue.
computer.
Sorry.
Come on. All right. I'm not sure we can make this work.
Might go to videos.
I had it for a moment. Where does it say videos?
What is it?
Videos. Look, it says videos.
I don't know.
Wildlife in HD. That's not it. USB disc.
While you're looking, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
What do you have for a mix of bedrooms on the residential?
It is. It's in the CUP.
Keep looking, Gordon.
It's in the CUP guideline, but it's basically, I think, 72 to 80 two-bedrooms, and then the rest are, a few studios, and the rest are one-bedrooms.
Okay.
Is that fair to say, Jeff? No.
Well, for the purposes of Desiree's question, the still perspectives.
Yeah, that would
Are
be
fine.
sufficient.
Don't look like.
Right, I know. There we go.
There you go.
All right, so this is basically looking
See the
toward
backside of
the
D
north.
lane.
Continental Boulevard is on the is in the upper left.
Yeah, that backside of D, and you're coming all the way around that, and it's super boring on that side. It's just flat panels though, like different colored. Sorry.
The sawtooth line is invisible.
Yeah, on the
There
back
they
side.
are.
Yeah, they're on the street side, and all the articulation on the apartment building I think is great all the way through. I just think that the back side of D, that it seemed like that side was more cost savings. Just a comment.
Do you want to speak to that? Or we just take it under advisement and,
Yeah, it's just,
Okay.
yeah. Ordinance-wise, I don't think there's anything on it. I like the way as a composition it works together.
I don't think there's anything quite like it in New Hampshire, which is pretty exciting. We have the freedom here in Merrimack to do a more kind of modern piece than what was able to be done in Portsmouth or even elsewhere where this has been, attempted. So let's talk a bit about, I didn't touch on phasing. What we are anticipating doing is I have to get my pointer back. What we're anticipating doing is, this project is going to all go simultaneously but concurrently. So, it's not all going to be built at once, in other words. So, but the idea is to start with building B and C, which is essentially one building that's connected by a walkway, and build that out. So that's the first, phase 1A, if you will, of the residential component. And then the hotel and retail building is phase 1B. So that will be built kind of at the same time, but may not be completed on the same time frame as the B and C buildings are. And then building D will be the third building. And as the residential gets leased up, then they'll start building A. But the idea is that all of the infrastructure, all of the parking is going to be, all of the drainage, all of the parking, all of the improvements are going to be constructed as a piece, and not, we're not going to play games with trying to phase them, because there's a value in not having a lot of site disruption. But it's going to probably take, several years to build this out. And, we'll try to keep it as, minimize the disruption to the folks that are there. And, we're going to have operating businesses and all of that. So I am not concerned about the fiscal viability of this as a mixed-use development, because the intention is not to build out, say, the residential and then take a hiatus for a while. The intention is to have this be a viable mixed-use project from the very beginning. And I think the way the numbers work, having done the fiscal impact study and reviewing it with Stu Arnett and revising it according to his direction, I'm confident that that this will be fiscally positive from the get-go. And at the end of the day, the numbers may be more advantageous than I'm suggesting. But I think that the final number that we settled on for the entire development was something like 600,000 net positive to the town, and I think it's going to be at least that. So, and I think that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Do members of the board have some continued questions or discussions with respect to whether the application is complete?
Okay.
Nelson?
One thing with regard to completeness, I was a bit confused by your talk of phasing. You gave us a couple of tables that I don't think were in the charts on phasing and different numbers of units, and you talk about a phase 1 and then then this, and is this phase one?
This is phase one.
This is, the whole thing is
The whole
phase
thing is phase one. What we have not
Oh.
discussed with staff is phasing of this phase. So what the comment from Tim and Robert was that if this is approved as one phase, then all of it needs to be complete before we get CO number
Yeah,
one,
right.
which is not acceptable. So.
I didn't think it would be, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, and as I said, we can document it however you need it to be documented, but what I outlined as distinct building pieces are the way the developer would like to proceed with development of the property. And we'll complete this phase one, and then phase two is the additional office building, 50, 60,000 square feet, whatever it is, and the structured parking.
And we don't see that here.
And
we're
that is
looking
not
at
part
that.
of this plan.
Okay, we're talking about, this is gonna be a standalone.
This is phase one
Phase-
under the CUP. The CUP was
Okay.
approved for 90,000 square feet of office and
Okay.
all these other uses. And so.
We've
what
got
we're-
97,000
Ni-
here.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
yeah.
That, I mean, whatever, it's approved, the CUP was approved for significantly more
Yeah.
office space, really, than what is in this plan.
Yeah.
All the other uses are captured in this first phase,
Okay.
okay?
Except the parking garage, which. yeah.
Except the parking garage.
Yeah, okay. If we got a breakdown somewhere of that table, I guess it's on one of your plans, the 97,700 square feet of office, the 44,800 of retail, 192 residential.
It is on the plans.
It is in there, okay. I didn't. Yeah.
I saw it in a memo or something.
It's actually, you know, there are two plans. There is this plan, which is the submitted overall site plan for this phase one,
Phase one.
right? And this, if you look at that plan, it has all of the, you know, it has all of the buildings and square footages on it,
okay.
okay?
Yeah.
The master site development plan
Mm-hmm.
for the CUP,
Yeah.
which is this plan, also has square footages on it
Yes.
and breakouts of different
Yeah.
uses. And I would submit to you that the only difference is in building F. We're building all the other buildings.
We don't have that one, right?
This was part of the CUP. It's recorded.
No, this doesn't look anything like what you presented at the CUP,
It is.
that I saw, excuse me.
In terms of the layout, I think Gordon is saying that these
The
contain
program
the
is the
uses in the same rough scope.
The
or
program is
size.
the same. We worked with staff to develop this plan in response, and it has the same number, the same uses, and
Yeah.
the same, you know, the same mixture of uses as was presented to this board as a part of the CUP. So this plan is what came out of the development process essentially, and was signed as the approved plan for the CUP
By staff.
by the chairman of the planning board.
When did you sign
Sorry,
it?
what did I?
That
What did I
was-
sign? I was reading something.
Oh, you signed this plan and the CUP back in November sometime, I believe.
The CUP, yes. I don't know if I've seen this plan before, though. Oh, it's this plan, yes.
Yeah.
With
this
the
plan
buildings
was-
in the south, not the parking lot in the south.
Right, right.
One with the garages, yes.
So this plan, along with the amended report and documentation and, you know, the fiscal impact study update, the shared parking analysis, all of that stuff was in that document, and that was subject to, you know, review and comment by staff and by others. And we knocked out all of the conditions of that and got it finalized in November, and then this is the plan that is set.
Okay, I guess I'm intrigued, because it doesn't look anything like what I saw when, as a planning board member, I voted on the CUP. So it's interesting that it's been signed off, it's been approved to some level, not
The
approved, but...
CUP has been approved, the plan has been.
Yeah, but that's not what was presented at the CUP.
The
hearing.
only difference really is that there was the residential was down in this corner instead
Well,
of
it
up
was
here,
along
and we
the
had a
road
parking
or
garage
something.
up here. I mean, that's really what the difference was.
I mean, I agree the same uses are there. It's just 180 degrees different than...
It is different.
Than what I'd seen or thought we had approved, so...
It is laid out differently. I think when we deal with CUPs, Tim is usually very careful to remind us that we'll ultimately see a site plan that's got the specific layouts, and I think with some of the CUPs we've seen in the past, what we've considered as a part of the process of looking at the CUP was very similar to what ultimately came through in a site plan, and this particular one has got the, blocks moved around quite a bit more. But my understanding from what Tim has always told us is that that's what the applicant is entitled to do. We can reject it if we don't think that it meets the site plan, but.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue that the applicant doesn't have the right to change it.
Yeah.
I guess your implication that the planning board somehow approved it because the chairman signed it something struck me as
Fair enough, Mr. Canning.
a false chord.
Fair enough. But it is substantially the same, it's the same mix of uses as was presented, and, we moved individual elements around in response to what we thought were some of the issues that were raised by the board and by the neighbors, as well as kind of the exigencies of the development process.
And I have seen similar layouts down in Myrtle Beach and things like that to what you're doing here. I understand that, and I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I'm just trying to understand it.
Fair enough.
And we'll have a public hearing in a little bit to hear whether the neighbors think you've met some of the things that were discussed from before or not. Nelson, let me remind the board as you're bringing up the questions, we still haven't addressed completeness, which is kind of usually a threshold question with not a lot
Okay, well, just to this point that we're making right now, is that I've requested from staff a copy, at least for
CUP.
review, of the CUP and the development agreement, both of which were not in this package tonight. So we didn't have that basis to go on. And I
Okay.
think we as a board need to be familiar with that, and as well as this plan as we go forward. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make that point, Mr. Chairman.
No, I
And
agree.
I
That
think
stuff is.
Robert was going to bring something tonight if he could get it together, and thank you.
I appreciate whatever Robert might have brought tonight, but I can tell you that the board deserves more time with it than trying to digest it on the fly here. We'll pass around a copy.
Absolutely.
And for what it's worth, there still is significant review that is left to be accomplished by both staff of various agencies as well as by your independent review consultant, CLD, Fuss and O'Neill. So we're well aware that we're not having any action this evening.
Desiree,
I was just going to make a motion, but I can wait my turn.
let's have it.
Okay, I was going to make a motion that the staff, or that we accept this application as substantially complete.
Is there a
Right.
second for
Yeah.
Desiree's motion?
Yep.
Mike Redding has a second. Any discussion? All in favor of finding the application complete, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 700 to find that the application's complete. I do want to make sure that we get a chance to get some public testimony from abutters, because obviously all the folks in the room didn't stay so far to hear us approve minutes later. Here for this. I do have some questions now that we've determined it complete, and the architecture and the renderings that you've shown interest me quite a bit. And I think Desiree was calling it kind of a composition, and I'm looking at it and saying I see two buildings that don't look anything like each other. And I guess that's what makes it a composition. To me, you got a couple of buildings that are in one style and a couple of buildings that are in a very much different style. And I have to say, when I looked at the 3Ds and the flyover, it looked terrible together, but when I was looking at them separately, I was like, well, how do you put these two things together and come up with something that feels harmonious? And normally we would be looking to have in a CUP some kind of common theme to the architecture throughout.
Well, I guess, you can look at it like, if you look at what an urban environment is, typically it's not. I mean, the set piece architectural themed developments are a relatively new phenomenon, right? So in an urban environment, you would typically have something that, is put together a little bit more organically, so that, you might have one group that builds one building, and then right next to it, you've got another building that's built by somebody else that's a completely different style. So I think that the architecture here kind of reflects that a little bit, in that there's a kind of a monotony to the sameness that you can get in a themed architecture. You can use materials to repeat and create some unity, and also I think that an important factor here is that we're going to use the streetscape as a unifying theme. So, and the landscape as a unifying theme. So, I mean, I guess that's my take on it.
So, my take on it is evolving. When I was looking through my package and all I saw was the elevations of the buildings separated from each other, I didn't see how it was going to work. But when I saw the 3Ds and the flyover, I thought you did kind of create something that had some, common themes to it and stuff. Not sure I'm all the way there yet, but I'm in a much better place with it than I was when I was sitting at home looking at just the elevations. So normally when we've dealt with CUPs, we really talk about master planning it and creating some common architectural themes. And there's not very many places in our regulations where we deal with architectural standards at all. And so the whole idea in a conditional use permit is look at the thing together. Now, if the idea is to create that urban streetscape that you're talking about, you're right. That's what it looks like. I mean, everybody built their own thing, and it works together because it works together. So, Desiree.
I don't think the sizes of the building, like the lengths of the building, are mentioned on there. But like on the L building, the building D,
Yep,
is it longer than 200 feet?
it is longer than 200 feet.
You're going to need undulations or some kind of waiver from that.
Okay.
That'll be required because you don't have it on either. Like you've made an attempt at it with the sawtooth that kind of reads like it a little bit more, but on the back side where you're coming in, the simple face of it, that doesn't exist. So that's
Okay,
something
we can
that,
take a look at that.
and I think, I don't know, that for the whole site.
The facades are exactly 200 feet, actually.
Okay.
So if we make them 199, do we still have to do the facade undulation?
It's the intent of the regulation we try to go after.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I will say that the intent here is to create, as I said, exciting and dynamic architecture. It's not to read the letter of the application or the regulation and see how we can get around something that might be inconvenient. So we'll make sure that we are fully compliant or request a waiver at if we need to.
Yeah, that's fine.
And part of the nature of the CUPs is that the rules aren't applied in exactly the same way or as strictly in this as they would if it was a freestanding warehouse building or something on its own site. All of the ins and outs of how it's different probably is beyond what I can throw out or explain. Maybe we'll have to get a lesson from Tim at some point down the line. But.
So on the hotel portion of it,
Mm-hmm.
was it for sure going to be Spring Hill Suites? Because that's extended stay.
Fairfield.
Oh, so your drawings are going to be changed then?
No, it says Fairfield.
It says Fairfield.
Oh, why can't I? No, really? I really thought I saw it. I'm sorry. I'm embarrassed. Okay, so it'll be Fairfield with that. And they're
already on board.
Fairfield.
yeah, and they're like the materials, they're like they've approved those materials for that. I know that sometimes some of them are
Other comments or questions?
Can I weigh in? Oh, of course.
Go ahead.
And Robin would be disappointed if I didn't. I have to say, I am very sceptical about you're thinking of the roundabout. I understand what you're trying to do. I think you will have given, or in this plan, you are giving too much freedom to people. I would be much happier to see a roundabout configuration very similar to where the Holiday Inn in Keene is on the Keene bypass, where traffic that's turning is actually furrowed into its own designated lane. I think your concept will, I'm like to say accident prone. I'd like to see something a little more controlled. I think the police feel that as well. I just feel it would work better. I don't like this. I think people coming down from the mall won't understand that they can go round the roundabout two abreast, because let's face it, nobody in this part of the world is very educated on roundabouts. I just think you've got to do a little more thinking. I would like to see, I think the police to some extent have got it right, that not a third lane, but effectively turning lanes are actually forced into their own little siding, if you like, so that they don't get the situation of trying to go round the roundabout but still turn off. I think that is fraught with potential accidents. It might work in Boston. I don't think it'll work here. And certainly I still have issues with some of your earlier assumptions about the state of the traffic, because as you probably noticed if you've driven down Continental Boulevard, the state has now modified the traffic signals at Tinker Lane, because I remember saying it would need something done there, and God knows I've been proved right. The state have now got filter lanes in there. I also expressed some other issues about traffic. I would share them with you. I don't want to think they're discussed immediately tonight, but I think this concept you have that you've got a perfectly working system around the area is not right. I'd like to sort of maybe put some time and put some thoughts down on paper, but I certainly don't think that roundabout is going to work the way you think it is, because people are not used to two abreast going round roundabouts. It just won't happen.
It does take time to get used to them, as we found out at Fidelity. You know,
Yeah,
we monitored
well,
that for a while, and it took a while
yeah,
for people
but-
to get used to it. But I will tell you, what you're looking at, it is a concept. It's not a designed plan yet. We haven't gone there yet, and we won't
All right.
go there till we get approval. So that's when we'll start to put the details in with deflection angles and things like that.
I think there is a difference between the employees of Fidelity and the general public tanking down from the mall, particularly on certain shopping days I can think of. The police referred to them. And certainly even on normal weekends, I don't think it's going to work, because the average motorist is not familiar with it enough to do what you think is going to happen, and I think you're just going to create problems. But I will put my thoughts down on paper and through the office. If the office wish to submit them to you, they will. But I don't like your roundabout design. I'm delighted to see you with roundabouts,
Would you prefer
but
to
I
see
don't
the
like the
three-way
design you've
intersection?
got up with.
Would you prefer to see the
No,
three-way
I think the
intersection?
roundabout's the choice. It's just how the approach lanes
Yes,
work
How
and,
it's
and
the
direct
approach
traffic
lanes.
around it.
Okay,
Go for the roundabout. I just like the lanes to be much more defined.
okay.
Yeah.
That's something
Um,
we can work on through the design.
And I've got more confidence than Alistair does in human beings and their ability to manage a roundabout, but I still haven't quite gotten the understanding of where the flow is going to go with the two lanes in this one. But I'm not going to say that the people in Boston can figure it out, but we can't over here.
Well, in fairness, Robin was off by 5 peak-hour trips in her projections.
And she wasn't, unfortunately, able to persuade the people of Bedford to put in a roundabout either.
Never mind.
Tom,
Just wanted to on that subject, I think it's very similar to the roundabouts over by the airport, and those seem to work from my perspective very well. And
But you've just made my point. If you're coming up a Brown Ave and swinging around, they have got your. If you're turning right,
there
you
are some extra special turns.
That's
and
what I
you
want to
might
see.
include those. But,
That's what I want to see.
But there are 2 lanes coming in. If you come in from the airport bridge, there's 2 lanes that go into those roundabouts and go around them.
I say
And-
what you.
And there are some special dedicated turns, but that's a 4 or 5 way intersection. This is
That's
a
what I'm-
3-way. So I suspect it has a good opportunity to work, but I do have less experience with roundabouts than you do.
Yeah. And I also think that the traffic that goes to Manchester Airport is, quite a bit more significant than, even though this is a,
Yes.
a fairly well-developed site, you're not going to be doing the kind of volume that goes to the airport. Other comments or questions? Nelson?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up a couple of other issues that we haven't talked about tonight, just as part of the acceptance and all. My question, it starts with a question, and that is, when we developed the Premium Outlet site, we went to great lengths to put in some monitoring wells that would monitor the water quality in the ground, and because of the proximity to the Merrimack Village District. I don't know if any of those wells were on this site or not, or if they were totally on the Premium Outlets property.
No, I believe that there are 3 wells on this property. I know there are 2. There may be 3.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I couldn't find them on the plan, but the plan's pretty busy.
Yeah, I can't tell you exactly where they are, but one of them is down by the corner there of Continental and Industrial.
Yep.
And I think there's another one further north on the Continental Boulevard frontage.
Okay, well, I've mentioned to staff that I'd like to look at the data that we have.
That data has been provided on a semi-annual basis to the town for
Right.
the last
And the
8
town
years.
has it. They've just got to pull it together in
Yeah.
a place where I can look at it. But I wanted to see if there were any trends developed after the number of years we've had this going.
I think
That's-
in my recollection is that
Yeah.
the only solid trend is that there's chloride impacts from Industrial Drive and Continental Boulevard. It's not coming from the site because there's a no salt policy which has been strictly adhered to.
Yeah, okay, that would be, so, but right now, we're about to introduce a lot of groundwater into the ground in this big infiltration system you've built. And this will have to be a no-salt site as well.
We
And
assumed as
just
much.
wanted to bring that up and have people thinking about it, and I'm planning to look at the data, and I think maybe others
Yep.
on the board would want to look too. So that's
Fair
a
enough.
point I wanted to make. The other thing, I think you've pretty much answered the rest of my questions. Oh yeah, the soils on this site. There was one time a talk about a stump dump or something being on this site.
There is an area of unsuitables that will have to be excavated and replaced with decent material. But that's all. I mean, we've got a series of new borings, and I haven't looked at them, so I'm not sure exactly what they say. Apparently, that big lump of material that's in there is not ledge, so that's good news.
Yeah, but what is it?
Well, it's a pile of rock, is what it is.
Okay.
There was a pile of material. There were piles of materials.
Piles of material. I
that
know
got
what they were. Yeah.
stacked up there
Yeah.
sometime when presumably they were building what was then Digital and is now Fidelity. And I think they took some of the material out of the lake behind when they dredged it for Spartan Way and put it over here. But, we are going to mitigate and remediate that situation.
Okay, I wanted everybody to be aware of that.
Yep.
Those were things from the past. I think the lighting plan leaves something to be desired. I couldn't read it. And that's because of its size and the size of the font that was used to make the lighting plan. But you've got to work that out with our consultant who's
Yep.
going to study it. That's all I have right now, Mr. Chairman. I think the rest
you,
are
Nelson.
minor things.
Tom?
Thanks. So you talked about parking, and it doesn't appear to me that there's enough parking in the vicinity of your apartment buildings for the people that live there. But you talked about 192 dedicated spots.
Correct.
And I wondered where those
There's
are.
192 spots directly adjacent or beneath the buildings.
Forgive me, these plans are so small that my eyes can't handle them. So I tried really hard to see spots. Well, I see there's a few underneath. But they're not under the entire
There's like
building,
125 underneath.
Each of these have got.
And then there is parking around the inside of that circle, and then there's 25 spaces out back. So there are 192 parking spaces directly adjacent to those apartment units, and then, you know, the additional parking is going to have to happen in the larger lots.
Is there any indication on those that they're for residents only, or is there, you're just saying that it's for residents
There
only?
will be. I mean, we'll take care of that.
Because I can imagine retail filling up as many of those spaces as they can get to if they're allowed to.
Yeah, no, it certainly would not
closed.
be for retail use.
All right.
And it also, I mean, those retail units, frankly, don't really have convenient access to those parking spaces because it's the backside of, you know, the apartment complex, that central area is the backside of the ground floor retail. So you wouldn't have customers like coming and going from that side. The idea is to orient it toward the street.
Yeah, but the whole walkability of the area seems like, from what I'm looking at, that some of that's accessible. But the other question I had, you're talking about 5-story buildings here.
Correct.
In a relatively small triangle. And I'm sure somebody's looking at this more than I am at this flat picture, but it just seems like the sun angles and stuff like that, there's not going to be a lot of sunlight in the middle there. And then it's going to be a really boxed-in region or area there. Your flyover looked nice, but I don't know if that represents midday or...
It's probably, I mean, it's a pentagon, so it's a little hard to talk dimensions, but the sides of those, if you, do I have my pointer? This building D, is the legs of that are 200 feet. So this is at least 200 feet across, if not more like 250 or 275 across. So, you know, I don't think that sunlight. Well, I mean, it. If you compare the two,
okay, maybe
it's pretty close. So, you know, I mean, it's not dinky. It's not a tiny little space. It's probably better than an acre that's inside of that. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I mean,
with
it's
big
not
5-story buildings all the way around it. I mean, you've only got the one large gap on the southwest side or something like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, we can take a look at that, but I don't have any real concern about it.
Okay. And you said you placed those there because they were quieter?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, it's residential use against residential use. So, you know, if we're going to, you know, if there's controversy about what goes there, then we thought that might be a more compatible use than, you know, a nightclub, for example.
Wouldn't argue with that. Office space might be nice, though, but which is what I thought you originally had back in there.
We actually had a parking deck. It was parking back there. In the first phase, it was the large parking lot was back in that corner, and in the future phases, that's where the parking deck was. So, I mean, at the end of the day, would you rather be looking at apartments or you know, a 6-story parking deck? You know, I think that the apartments would be a better thing to have up against.
I don't know. I'm sure the butters will give us their opinion. What was the other thing I was asking about?
Actually, I think that was one of the concerns with the parking, with the residences, is that the light
Right.
from the
From-
cars
from the
going through that
circulation, right,
parking
right.
was an issue.
Right.
So
That's
pulling that
exactly
out
right.
of there and putting the residents, I think, was a valid response.
Thank you.
You can put walls on your parking garage. I mean, they do that all the time, 3 or 4 foot walls on the outside of the parking garage, which blocks lights. But anyway, so I guess I see you've got a lot of parking there. It concerns me that people are going to park out there at the extremes and walk back, but it's not any worse than the mall up at the top of the hill, so which does fill up, and it'll do what it does. To get to that back parking, you're coming through this oval and then cutting off of the corners there or something? Is that right? Or where's
Yeah,
the traffic
you're talking
flow?
about the parking for the residences?
No, just for the back corner of that big, huge
Oh,
lot.
Yeah,
How do you
you're
get
coming
there?
through you're coming through the oval and coming through the corners. Alternatively, you can come around the back side of the buildings this way. But yes.
And then the one other concern is the view of this whole facility from Premium Outlets Boulevard. You're looking at the back side of that office building where you put a lot of effort into your architectural facade on the front. The back that we were talking about earlier is what you see going up and down the street
And as
there.
Ms. Fault pointed out, perhaps those facades need a bit more attention.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Others? I'm anxious to hear what the neighbors want to tell us about the development, so.
They're anxious to tell.
That's good. Okay. Let's open it up for abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in.
My name is Beth Burns, excuse my voice. I live at 5 Spruce Street. I'll try to be as brief as I can, despite how much I want to talk about. I believe the best way for anything to work, especially nowadays, if, business and we gotta see both sides of the coin, and I'm trying to do that. And I understand Monahan owns the property. I understand he and his affiliates are in a business and they want to sell and build. I understand that. But at the same time, I think it is beyond fair for them to take into account who bought from him first. And it was us. Those houses, there's several of us have lived there the 47 years. Those houses have been there. I've lived there for over 20. And, it's our home. We're not living there to be convenient for work. It is our home. And when I look out my kitchen window now, I see diagonally, I see the lights to go into the entrance of the outlets and everything, and I've grown accustomed to it. But the thought of more lights, tall buildings, when I look out my kitchen window and seeing tall buildings and other things like that, the beautiful wooded area behind my home and the rest of us on Spruce is going to look like South Nashua in some ways. So what I ask is, Gordon kindly, at one of our much earlier meetings, which I was hopeful and I showed my appreciation to him on that, his opening part was talking about our buffer being left as it is, as well as the trees along the other side facing where Dunkin' Donuts and everything is, and I appreciate that. But is it in true understanding exactly where our buffer is and how it meets with the emergency exit? I mean, I know we've talked about and we've said things, but is it clear exactly, including the trees that are on it, the vegetation, the weeds? I mean, it is all going to stay as is. Is that correct? Okay.
See, Gordon's nodding his head up and down, and he'll certainly have a chance to answer a little bit later as a part of this. But it appears that everything that is on that side of the access road is going to stay right where it is.
Okay. And that, I just wanted, is that correct, Gordon? Okay. And I appreciate that. He did mention something about how 15 or 16 feet or something part of the buffer was at one area. I don't think it's, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying, I don't believe it was that high. I would rather the buffer, I don't really want any digging, I don't really want any touching. I mean, I think it's fair to just leave the buffer as it is, and I would rather focus on any building, any drivable area being farther from us than that. I would rather have that than coming along and touching something that was supposed to be left as is. And is it also going to be the emergency exit remains exactly as it is? Is that correct? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that's what they're proposing.
Okay, I just want to clarify. What I would hope is, if anything's any more privacy or anything's going to be created, or buffer, I should say, I think it should be, so if you're going to put buildings like that, I mean, it is closer to us than you may think, looking at the picture. I mean, that is fairly close. I mean, can we put in landscaping or anything there? So we have our buffer, we have the emergency exit, we have part of that property there. Could it be something created there, attractive there, so everything doesn't look so large and overpowering behind us when we look out our windows?
Yeah,
I think that's reasonable. I mean, you know, and I mean it in an attractive form on both ends for Gordon, you know, Tom, and everybody else involved. I mean, I know it needs to be suitable for them, but I'd like it to be suitable for us, and that's part of me trying to be fair about it. I'd appreciate that. The other thing, I'm not sure I agree or understand how, in God's name, we're going to have enough water, but I'll leave that in the planning board's hands to determine with their studies. And I've spoken to the Merrimack Village District.
So that's our approach to it as well. If the Merrimack Village District says they can supply the site, then they can supply the site, and we don't have any basis to look into it any further.
I understand that.
When the Merrimack Premium Outlets project went forward, my understanding is that they had in mind the volume of water that was going to be needed for this entire site, including the out parcels and all the build out. And so my understanding is, and we'll sort of explore this a little bit further, but when Merrimack Village District said, yes, we can supply the water in 2010 or whenever it was that it was for the mall, it included the ability to supply for this site as well.
I do
So
recall that.
They've already indicated and agreed that they can do that.
Okay.
Now, that changes, obviously, with the differences in the wells and all of that, with PFOA and what's going on at St. Cobain and 2 wells being offline and what that does for our abilities to supply volume. I do also understand that there's an interconnect between the Merrimack Village District and the Pennachuck Waterworks, as well as an interconnect up on the north end with Bedford's water system, where if we were ever required to do so, we could maintain water pressure in our system by those interconnects. I don't know anything more than that about it, and that was that much. I don't know.
Well, the reason I didn't know when the outlets were on the table, but we didn't really take into account picturing, you know, a hotel, apartment buildings, a restaurant, and you know, an office and all that. So it is a big difference between what we thought about when the water-wise, when the outlets were on the table, compared to what we're talking about now. It is a little bit of a difference, you know.
Yeah, I wasn't.
People-wise, the restaurant's going to need water. The residents are going to need water. I mean, it's.
I've mentioned this before on occasion, but the very final vote on the Merrimack Premium Outlets was my very first planning board meeting as an alternate way down there in the end where Dan is. Different room, the old courtroom kind of a thing. So I don't know what was part of the discussion at then, but Nelson was here, Alistair was here, Lynn was here, Tom was here. We've got enough institutional knowledge, plus we've got all the files. We can go ahead and have a look and see what was discussed back then and make sure.
Okay.
That makes a lot of sense. One thing that I did, I don't know if you're done yet or not, so I want to let you say whatever else you want to say, but you've also got a correspondence that you sent us, which, had you not come to testify, I would have read into the record, but I want to ask you, do you want me to, do you want to tell us what you said in maybe you already have, or do you want me to read it in addition to what you're testifying? It's up to you. Or we could, it'll be a part of the record no matter what, because it's been submitted, all the planning board members have gotten it.
Nelson, I thought you wanted to read it for me.
I'll read it for you. I didn't bring one with me, but I did.
No, you can if you want, Robert. I think I'm basically stating that I was concerned about water.
Yeah.
Our homes still feeling and looking like homes, and I would like to believe anybody else, putting the business personality aside, if you live there, would you really want that to be what you see when you look out your windows or out in your yard? I mean, there is a way to please both of us, I think, and I would like to respectfully have us do that, is all I'm asking.
I can't imagine getting through this process without the planning board members wanting to go out and have a look for themselves on the site.
And you're welcome to come right in my backyard if you want and see how I see. And like I said, I am trying to be reasonable, but I just really want the planning board, Gordon, Mr. Monahan, just understand, especially Mr. Monahan. I mean, we were his first buyers. Be proud that you have people that liked your neighborhood. We bought those houses. We made them our homes. I've raised 2 kids in it from scratch. I know many other people who have, they're our homes. Please respect our privacy and our needs behind our homes. I think that is beyond reasonable. And the other thing I did want to mention, Robert, was the sidewalks. I don't have anything against sidewalks necessarily. I mean, I understand the need of them in certain areas. And if I misunderstood, Gordon, I apologize, but as we were talking about going up along the left side of the lot,
Yeah, there's
we're
a tail
thinking
end of the sidewalk that's going to end up right
around
there.
that, and then meeting with where the emergency exit. Would that be a danger in some ways if people came flying out of there, though, if there was an emergency, or people being sarcastic and coming out there when they're not supposed to?
Gordon, and I know that you got to talk to us, and we'll ask Gordon. It's just
Since I'm kind of talking about something he said, I kind of want to look at him, the man when I'm talking about.
I get it and understand. So in terms of what the planning board would consider and think about in terms of the interaction between the emergency access road and the pedestrian way is, what do our fire department and police department think?
Right.
And if they tell us that they don't have those concerns, then as a planning board, we can certainly apply our own knowledge and basis of thinking as well. But that's where the expertise is, and that's where we're going to rely. If they come to us and say we've got these concerns, we should manage it differently, we should lay it out differently, I'm sure the applicant is going to recognize that that's really not a choice anymore. It's going to be something that they've got to accommodate.
Right.
In general, the interaction of driveways and pedestrians in the notion of in the instance of an emergency isn't something that sort of creates a barrier to developing a piece of property. Most places don't have a dedicated emergency access. They just use their front driveway for the fire truck or the ambulance, and it all works out.
So the majority of those trees, though, nevertheless, are going to remain. Okay, obviously, as well as our buffer, which I've said many times. Yeah. The other thing, and I just want to know, is it going to be made clear to people that is strictly emergency use only? I mean, I know we can't put barriers up everywhere, but I mean,
it's going to be gated.
It stays gated down in the end by Camp Sargent Road.
Okay.
Not gated on the interior. I think that there appears to be some intent to stripe a big bunch of it, and that you get access there to for dumpsters and things, but it's not traffic for site circulation for people to be using to drive around to get to their apartment building or get to the back.
Okay. One other thing, Robert, what I was thinking of is, I know we need a place to throw our trash, and I appreciate that. I hope it doesn't end up on the ground more than an appropriate spot and end up in my yard, but can the dumpster be in a different location? Does it have to be right where they're anticipating?
I don't know. We talked to them about, what are your concerns about the location?
Well, it just seems like where it is, it just seems awfully close to us, in a sense. I mean, could it be in a more middle kind of a spot, which might look more, is everybody meant to use that trash?
But you're
that
talking
dumpster,
about
all the residents, the restaurant, the hotel.
100-foot buffer, and then probably another 100-foot, and then across the road. You're 250, 300 feet away from your property. I mean, that's like not the neighbor that's next to you, but the one after that, doing something on their property that would, I mean, at some point you're a pretty good ways away, isn't it?
Well, looking at it this way looks a little different than, what I mean, when you envision it by your home. It's a little different view. Okay. All right. I guess that pretty much says my most important things that I was concerned about, and I hope it's understandable, and I hope we can all take all that into account for all of us. Okay.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have your letter, your email be a part of the record because it's already been submitted to the department. Rather than reading it, I think you've offered all the same testimony here.
Yes.
But this isn't your only chance to speak. Every time that we come here and we have a planning board meeting on this, we're going to have a public hearing section of it. So if there's anything you felt like was in the email that you didn't get to say or you forgot to say or whatever, You didn't lose your turn. So,
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
thank you for that.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak?
Hi, I am Barb Amaral, and I'm at 1 Spruce Street.
What's your address, Barb?
1 Spruce.
One Spruce Street. Okay. While you're signing in, I'll go ahead and mention one of the things I noticed in reviewing the plans, Gordon, for your benefit, is you haven't identified the abutters around your site plan on any of these plans.
I think there is exactly, there is a plan that
I didn't see it in the bunch that I got. If it's here, just direct me to it later. I'm sorry, please go ahead.
So I actually have some pictures. Can I just bring them up?
Yeah, did you
of
bring
my
one
view?
copy in
I
a
have
set,
three.
or is it multiple copies?
I have 3 copies of one picture.
Okay, so yeah, start on the end, and then just give them to Dan, and we'll pass them around, and then you can talk about them while we're passing them around to each other.
Share.
Oh, they're all alike, yeah.
Okay.
Take one of those and
Yeah, okay.
So that picture is the view out of my bedroom window over towards the property. And it's looking at the infamous 100-foot buffer, which in the wintertime you can see is not much of a buffer because it's all deciduous trees and you can see directly through to the property.
Okay, I got you.
This has been discussed before. We talked about the possibility of some low-growth evergreens being added to help mitigate that. I would really like to see that happen. Also, down at my end, the very end of Spruce, there isn't really a berm there. There's a slight rise. There was a mention of added vegetation. There's really not a lot of room because the access road is right up against. I keep meaning to actually measure where the 100 feet goes to, but I know it's pretty close to where the access road is from the end of my property, I believe. So just really concerned about the sight lines and the light coming through.
I certainly think that we can talk with the applicant about some of the low growth that we talked about before, and I think they were already offering up some ideas that they would be open to that kind of discussion. I think, though, things that are ground level to, say, 10, 12 feet high are not going to keep you from seeing these buildings because they're multi-story buildings.
Sure.
Those are sort of more like mid-height or even some of the tall vegetation that it takes to obscure those. Those kinds of things, if they were amenable to and the planning board required or however that plays out, doing that, usually that starts out with something that's insufficient because it's new plantings, and then in 10 years it's tall enough to do something about. So we got to think about how to deal with that, or what it is that we can do that could have some immediate effect, and be effective at screening it. So that makes some sense.
Well, along the lines of the low growth, there was the mention of the parking underneath those residential buildings. So there would be car lights now that presumably wouldn't have the walls that would have been there had there been the parking garage.
Well, we'll have to look at what the building design looks like, but parking underneath doesn't necessarily mean that it's all open air where the lights are escaping from under the building. They could have walls, around the
Probably does.
area. It looked like it from the elevations that they have. I don't know if you've seen that plan set that we all have. Have you gone down to the department to take a look at it?
No, I haven't had a chance.
We can certainly leave some around for the folks to share or have, and they're available at the department. But as I'm looking at it, each one of the buildings that has something underneath it, none of it is sort of just open air like a building up on pilings with the cars free to go wherever they want to go underneath it.
Okay. There was a mention of it possibly being below grade. Will there be any blasting involved in this?
They haven't indicated that yet, but we'll have to raise that with the applicant and see. Obviously, we know that it's an issue of particular sensitivity, so.
Okay. Also, parking, so at peak times, like day after whatever, Black Friday, there have been people parking along my property I'm at the corner of Camp Sargent and Spruce. There have been no parking signs put up by the police, temporary ones, but people have parked there. And I guess I have a concern of, with people being able to walk through, people potentially parking there to get in to visit residences or to the retail or whatever. So I'd like to see that addressed, maybe put permanent no parking signs or something along that strip of Camp Sargent.
Seems perfectly reasonable to me.
Parking on Camp Sargent or on Spruce?
On Camp Sargent.
Thank you.
Which is my property, along my property, since I'm on the corner. There was also the mention of the walkway along the access road. I'm just wondering if that would end up cutting into the 100-foot buffer, since that's the buffer and there's not much extra room down at the Camp Sargent end of that.
We'll have to explore it and see. Not sure how that lays out.
And then the other thing was the dumpster. I think part of the concern is the noise. I mean, we already get the backup beeps from the security from the mall coming down and back of the road. So if there's going to be trucks back there, we're going to hear the trucks. We're going to hear the beeps of them backing up. It's more the noise, I think, than the visual.
So on some proposals that we've dealt with in the past, and I think the outlet mall's probably got the same restrictions because it's where the idea comes from, to restrict deliveries or trash pickups to certain hours of the day. Are there hours, middle of the day is obviously better than the first thing in the morning or late at night for those kinds of things. And it's probably better for the people that are living in the apartment if this thing gets built too. They don't want to have it 7 a.m. for them either.
Mm-hmm.
Are there hours that you have in mind that would be okay with you, or?
Yeah, daytime hours would be middle of the day would be best.
So business hours, 9 to 5,
Yeah.
whatever.
I
8
mean,
to
but my
6.
other question is, why do they have to be located over there? There's plenty of other space on the property. Put the dumpsters that are not near the abutters.
Yeah, we'll have to see. We'll explore that with the applicant and see if there's some opportunities to pick and choose. Actually, I think that one of the things is the staff noticed is that there doesn't appear to be a dumpster designated for Building A, or a location for it. So that's still kind of an unanswered question too.
Okay, and that was it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thanks.
Good evening. Nancy
evening.
Harrington, 11 Spruce Street.
This must feel strange, huh?
How do you like it down there?
Not bad, not bad. Okay, some of the issues have already been brought up, so I'm not going to be redundant. But I do reemphasize just one thing. I think the dumpster is an issue. I did go down and look at the plans down in community development and notice that the dumpster, now there's no reason why it has to be there. It can be in the other side of the building. And you're right, the other building doesn't denote a dumpster. So is that dumpster for both buildings or not? I don't know, but
Yeah,
that's
we'll get that
certainly-
sorted out. I mean, I think the reason they chose that side of the building is because the other two sides are sort of this idea of a streetscape or this, park
Well-
or courtyard kind of an environment. So
Well,
that's
we
why
have a
they chose-
streetscape in our backyard.
Yeah, I get you.
So they can, I just don't see, I guess what makes me nervous is they will be utilizing the emergency road to access that.
Yeah.
I just don't like the idea of opening that up to possibilities in the future. And there really isn't a good argument that I can see why it could not be put to the left side. I wish I had his little thing here. In the building. Right there. Point to right there. Right there. There's no reason why it couldn't be put over there. It is
Yeah,
away
well-
from the majority.
There is a dumpster for each, there will be a dumpster for each building. I'm not sure that we've
Okay,
figured
so
out
one
where
could
it's
be,
going for-
So one, okay,
So
which,
one could
which,
be here, we may be able to slide this around to the end or something like that, but.
no, it's still the same, well, as long as you're not using the emergency entrance. That's my concern. I mean, there's no reason
Well,
why.
the emergency
It could be
access on their
here,
side of the gate
And it could be there. So the truck comes in this way and picks up two, right there. That's out of view.
Well, there's one located here.
Okay, so move it over. All I'm saying is I would like to.
We'll take a look.
We'll take a look at it.
I'll meet with you and help you decide. Anyway, so I guess that's my concern. The other thing is the whole idea, and you had mentioned about the phasing in. I don't know the details, but I know that there is an issue about being able to give occupancy for residences in this kind of a setup, and a certain percentage of the commercial or whatever it is has to be done. You're dealing with it up north.
Yeah, we've dealt with it. So on the other two CUPs, we've asked that they offer a mixed-use development throughout. And I think that's what they're proposing to do here as well. Although
Right.
in this one, they've taken a bit of a sharper pencil attack at that and said that they're going to be revenue beneficial to the town, pay more in taxes than they have in services throughout, which is kind of the point of what we've done with those other two. was to
Okay,
say.
but if I understood correctly, and maybe I'm not, so
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong. You're trying to prevent development from doing residences, but not doing the rest of
Yeah,
it.
that's it, exactly.
And I just want to be able to encourage you strongly not to change that path.
We won't.
One of the things that's a little bit different with this one is the building is mixed use.
In terms of the retail on the first floor.
Right.
Now, is there a percentage that,
First floor, second, third floor.
no, I'm saying.
With the other two CUPs around, we were actually build your residential if you have any commercial at all. And so it wasn't really percentage or matched or anything like that. Just you had to have some commercial in order to get all of your residential in. And even with just that low threshold, you're not building in either one of the two other CUPs.
Okay,
So.
and that was my other thing. Whatever that criteria is, I'd like to
Yeah.
encourage. And the only other comment, I think your entrance is terrific. The only problem is now it's at my house.
We'll make sure we block some.
But I know. Because
That
really,
berm is there.
the berm is there, but this here, you're absolutely right, and I think you're right. At the highest point, it's about 15 feet.
Yeah.
I think you're right. But this section here is level. Just beyond the drain, just beyond the drainage, it's level. So if you put some greenery there, put some arborvitae, that's fine. That'll cover it. But it did crack me up when I saw it. I said, well, solve that. It really did solve the lighting problem going in the neighborhood. So I think the configuration is much better. And I think it's 6 of one, half dozen of another, whether the building's there or the parking there. Each one has its pros and cons, so. Okay, so those are just my major issues, and I just really would like to strongly encourage you to help with the, as Barbara said, who lives over here. As you can see, you really can see through. So whatever greenery you can put in, whatever. And don't get the ones that are 2 feet high. You can go for the 7 feet.
60-foot building.
Or whatever. Whatever you can do would really help this whole area. And just put a couple of extra ones right over there.
Yeah, Robert's got, he's got one.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you,
for your
Nancy.
testimony, Nancy. Other abutters or citizens?
Good evening. My name is Michael Mills. I live at 7 Arbor Street in Merrimack. Arbor Street is just north of Building A, about 600 feet probably away from that boundary line. I have several questions. I don't mean to take up the whole evening, but I've spent several hours going through these plans. I went to the planning board office, and let me just start by saying that they're very, very helpful, very professional there. But I was asked to, when I asked about how do you get a conditional use permit, I was told to look at two RSAs, in particular 671 and 676. And my reading of that is that in order to pass a plan as complex as this, that public hearings and perhaps even a vote would be necessary in order to make these necessary changes. I guess I'm asking the board, is my reading of that wrong, or is a public hearing needed? Do the people here living in the town, do we get a vote to say whether we want 5-story buildings? Do we want something as complex and as intense as this within our town?
I can answer that at least a little bit. I'd rather go look at those two statutes to see exactly what they say. But what I anticipate is that those statutes talk about how a town can adopt a conditional use permit kind of regulatory scheme.
Yes.
And so that's built into our site plan and subdivision and probably our zoning regulation or zoning ordinance. All of that was adopted either based on town vote or approval of town council, or it's gone through that process, so that we've now had for some time conditional use permits as a possibility in our ordinances. So yes, the process, whatever the statute lays out for how they're adopted, has to be followed. I would suggest that at whatever point 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whenever the conditional use permit was first installed in the regulations, that process would have been followed. It doesn't mean that there's a concurrent opportunity to vote each time a conditional use permit comes forward to say, do we still want to go down this path and have this in our regulations? We've put it in as a town, I don't know, Nelson, 10, 15 years ago?
Well, yeah, it's been modified over time.
Oh, yeah.
Originally, we had CUPs for many years, but then originally those were voted in by the people, and then later it was modified somewhat by action of the town council. And in this particular case, it was further modified by the zoning board of adjustment, which gave them relief from the size requirements and so on for one of these type of
That's true. They've got some
developments.
variances on this
So
site.
it's been a step-by-step process, but it began with a vote of the people, and then it eroded or expanded from there.
My reading of both of those RSAs is that the board may want to look into it, whether or not they're exceeding the authority that those votes might have granted the board. My next question is about our notices. Again, you need to look at the town assessing records to determine who the abutters are. And I think this plan before us is extremely deceiving. I've never seen anything as deceiving as that since I've been in real estate for 45 years now. To start with, on the left-hand side, that green area does not belong to the site. To show that as being a green area that the developer is setting aside as a green area has no merit. That property does not belong to the developer. Now you look at all of the green, I assume that those are trees on the left-hand side of the property, the bottom of the property, all around the top right-hand corner, going around the road leading to the cul-de-sac. Those aren't trees. That is known as the area that the snow is going to be disposed into. They're going to plow where those trees are currently showing. To show it as a green area, and when I looked at it, I said, wow, there is a lot of green area. Look at the map. There's not going to be trees there. That whole area that up on the right-hand corner is shown on the map, on the plan, as being nothing more than a wooden rail. It does not show any landscaping on there whatsoever. When you get to the building, let me look here at the plan so I can refer to the building numbers. When you get to building D, the building up on the right-hand corner, the the upmost right-hand corner of that seems to indicate that there's green area there. If you look at the map, that is where all of the snow is going to be disposed of from that entire parking lot on the right-hand side of the property. If you do the math and you calculate and you take into consideration the compression ratios of snow, the higher the deeper the snow, the higher you build it up, the more it compresses. When you take into consideration the fact that you can't go straight up dumping snow there, that right-hand corner is going to be a minimum of 30 to 35 feet high of snow. Do the math. There's no trees there. That's 30 to 35 feet high on a two-story, I believe it's a two-story building. You're going to have a building there that's going to be 30 or 35 feet high, and the whole right-hand corner is going to be buried in snow. Number one, that's not only inconceivable, it's certainly a dangerous situation. You're going to have kids coming over there, let's slide down the snowbank. They're going to do that. They're going to go into where the traffic is. That is true all the way around this plan. When you do the math and you look at the left-hand corner where the trees are there, where all the circles are, you're talking about a very narrow band of area it's 15 feet wide. When you take the parking from that entire area and put it into those places, you're talking about snowbanks that are going to be 20 to 25 to 30 feet high throughout that entire area. Again, do the math. It's very easy to calculate. Number two, when you look at the building in the upper left-hand corner, it has parking behind the building shown on the map. How do you get there?
Where's that parking lot? The access road.
No, I appreciate, so let me offer two things. First, there's access to between the two buildings, but I've got to sort of constrain you to offering testimony.
Okay, well, let me offer testimony then. I don't think you can get to the parking lot on that building the way the plan is currently designed. And I'm not sure why there's parking behind there. The only thing that's going to do is infringe in the 200-foot buffer before you can put a building. The top of that building is exactly 200 feet from the possible property lines of the owners of Spruce Street. So the developer's intention is to leave the 100-foot buffer of trees that you can see through, then put a sidewalk, then put a road, and then put a parking lot. And for a 5-story building, I'm going to see that from my house. My house is a distance from this. I'm going to walk out, and the only thing that I'm going to see are the apartment lights from those properties, from that building. All of that can be corrected by just moving those buildings, as someone else had previously stated. Just move those buildings down a couple hundred feet. You've got the entire parking lot down there. Why not bring all of those buildings down and get away from the property line? It's true that the police department suggested that a berm be put up that's going to be 25 feet high with trees on it. I don't think the police department was suggesting to tear down the berm that's there. I think they were suggesting that you build an additional berm to shield that side of the buildings where the apartments are. In addition, my reading of the rules and regulations is that you can't have a building that's a facade of 160 feet. Am I correct in that?
I'm not aware of a regulation that limits the facade of a building to 160 feet.
I can tell you which regulation it is.
The CUP probably would, if it
Well, I
wasn't-
could tell you after the meeting, but there is a regulation that states that a building can't be longer than 160 feet. And it built
all of the
well-
buildings at the premium outlet malls are much longer than that.
And the length is oftentimes controlled by the use of it. When you're looking through the chart, like each of the uses will have a different length of building attached to them.
You don't have to find it right now. If you get
Okay.
it, if you get it into Robert's hands, it'll get into the analysis.
Why is it necessary? How does a 5-story building become compatible with single-family residential houses that are 1 or 1.5 or 2 stories high? It never does. And for this board to allow a development like that to come in and literally destroy a neighborhood that's been there for 50 years, I think is unconscionable. We talk about light, noise pollution, odor pollution, visibility. A building 60 to 65 feet high has to be an eyesore. The noise from 172 apartments is not going to be a quiet situation. That building, those 2 buildings that are closest to Spruce Street, are people going to be sitting out on their patios? Are they going to be sitting out on their balconies? And if they do the residents on Spruce Street look up and wave to the people that are out there on their balconies or looking through their windows? I don't think anybody here on this board would want a 5-story building in their backyard. I mean, I hope nobody wants that. The sidewalk. It was brought up that people now are parking on Camp Sargent Road. I think on occasion they're parking on Spruce Street. The police department on certain holidays have towed those cars away. Having a sidewalk leading out to Camp Sargent Road is not going to help anybody. I don't know, why do we need a sidewalk there? That's just going to encourage people to park on those surrounding streets. If you don't park on Camp Sargent, you're going to go around the corner, you're going to park on Spruce. If you don't park there, you're going to take the first left-hand corner, and you're going to park on Arbor Street. Then you're going to walk through and take the sidewalk that the developer thought was really a great idea to put there. That's not going to work. The plan that was submitted goes on to talk about moving the security gate. There's been statements made tonight that that road, the access road that's there now, is not going to be moved. If it's not going to move, then why are we moving the security gate? Any response on that?
Before, you got to offer your testimony. We'll take up
Okay.
your issues with the
plan
applicant.
shows
I'm not their
there's-
advocate.
That's moving, that's a contradiction. Is it moving or is it staying in the same spot? If it's staying in the same spot, why are they moving the security fence? Number 2, the security fence that's there is inoperative probably 30 or 40% of the time. There is no fence there. Someone takes that fence down, I don't know whether it's the outlet center or whatever, but that road is open at least 30% of the time where you could drive in there, and if people are allowed to drive in there, what does that do with the rest of the traffic situation? Going to the road that goes into the project here at the corner of Industrial Drive and the one leading into the condo, into the outlet center. The police have stated that on many occasions, there's a 1 to 2 hour backup leading into that road. They testified, or they submitted information, that on several occasions, it's required that 2 or 3 police officers direct traffic out there during the day to allow cars to come in and out of that intersection. It was stated tonight that during peak evening traffic time, that 1 hour time period, there will be an additional 600 cars during that 1 hour time period. How are we going to manage additional cars when there's a traffic backup there already during certain times, and yet we're adding 600 more cars to that? There has to be another entrance into this area, and it can't be that same road leading to the cul-de-sac.
Roundabout.
The
It's not a
roundabout.
cul-de-sac, yeah.
I'm sorry, cul-de-sac, roundabout, different.
Yeah, it looks kind of the same, but
Okay,
works
the
different.
roundabout. When you get up to the roundabout, if there is a 1 or 2 hour delay getting out, how are 500 or 600 cars going to turn into this development? How is that going to happen? It's going to be backed up all the way into the outlet like it is now. We've got 500 or 600 more cars coming up in during that 1 hour time period trying to make a left-hand turn. Talk about a traffic backup. The traffic backup on Industrial Drive is going to become unbelievable because there's no place to go. You can't have an outlet center with the amount of traffic it generates and all of this additional development with the one entrance. It's impossible. Let me talk about parking for just a moment. The parking shows handicap spots. Again, reading the ordinance and doing the math, there's 25 to 30 parking spots for handicapped people that have been omitted from the plan. They have to be added and in the proper location so that a handicapped individual can access these properties. I look at the plan and I don't see where they're going to put 25 or 30 additional handicap spots that are going to provide safe and easy access for anyone who's handicapped to get to any of these buildings. On the site plan, I looked at the plan, I saw where it said patio and tent. I assume the patio is for an adjacent restaurant. The tent has already been described. I'm not sure what next to the word tent, LA, stands for. Supposed to only give testimony and not ask a question, but may I ask what LA stands for on the plan?
Landscaped area.
Landscaped area, thank you. What's being proposed in this past year is 695 additional occupied units between hotels and apartments. I think a lot more consideration would go into the plan if I walked into this planning board and asked for a subdivision of 695 houses. We're looking at these things separately. Someone asked a question about water. Wells are being shut down. Water is being rationed in the summer, this past summer, because of the drought, and yet we're adding 695 additional bathrooms in less than a year, plus 45,000 square feet of restaurant space. Let me point out that the information pertaining to how many school-aged children should certainly be examined. I also talked with the New Hampshire Housing Finance Commission today and asked for a copy of the report where that information was generated from. That information goes back to 2004. It was reprinted in 2010, but that information now is 14 years old. It's quite conceivable, having been a landlord for 45 years, that to estimate the number of school-aged children in a two-bedroom apartment, I think the estimate is just very, 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 very low. I've had the opportunity of talking to many friends that I have that are also landlords and quoted the number that was used in that study, and they were, let me say, they were honestly shocked. I haven't found many people that have a two-bedroom apartment that do not have a school-aged child in it. The emergency access road comes in, and before the emergency access road used to run all the way up to the outlet center. The emergency access road now comes in and ties in to the road that comes into this new development. My understanding, having attended many of the last meetings, was that the purpose of that access road was to provide uninterrupted flow of emergency vehicles to the outlet center. I don't see that being reflected on this plan. Again, I can pull out the sites, but looking at the rules and regulations for the planning board, it says that the developments have to be compatible with the residential neighborhoods that they're adjacent to. And I believe most of the other neighbors do not believe a 5-story apartment building 200 feet away from our residential neighborhoods is compatible. All of that can very easily be moved down to a point where the visibility is not as great as it is where this plan is being shown. I paraphrased one of the rules and regulations here, and I'll be happy to cite it if the board wishes. But it clearly states that the proposed developments will not result in unreasonable impacts to adjoining properties or users. This is a giant impact on our neighborhood. We're going to walk out of our door. We're going to see trees that now are 30 feet high. I didn't go out there and measure them. And on top of that is a building 5 stories high. This board has in the past been very conscientious about buffers. But the problem is that you don't know how good the buffer is until the project is developed. I know I've invited the members of the planning board, I know Beth has, other neighbors have, to go out and look at this 100-foot buffer that we're talking about. I'm glad the door pictures that were presented. But, you know, go out to oh gosh, is it Sherwin Lane, which is a road off Camp Sargent Road that abuts the property at Shaw's, the Shaw's Supermarket right off Camp Sargent Road. And at that time when that was approved, it was decided if we put up an 8-foot fence, that's going to protect the mobile home park from seeing the lights at Shaw's. Please go out there tonight on your way home. You can't miss it. Shaw's shows up, and there's a half a dozen of mobile homes there. They're all lit up because no one took the time to realize what a 6 or 8 foot buffer does to a building that's 100 feet away. I know this is 200 feet away. We're talking five stories. Take a ride down Whittier Place. The lights were not supposed to be seen from Whittier Place. I remember sitting here many nights talking about that. Take a ride down Whittier Place. Don't go in the entrance, the road closest to the highway. Go in that way and look up. Look at the houses out there that are lit up as a result of the lights at Whittier Place. Just keep that in your mind and think, what's going to happen with 160 feet of frontage with people having their lights on in the house, the parking lot's being lit up because there's a parking lot behind that, the lights are going to be shining down, and what do we have? We have a series of trees that, as the picture shows, you can see through. It's not going to work. Let's move all those buildings down south, make that a bigger buffer, and I think it's a plan that no one or won't be as objectionable as this plan is. Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Are there others who wish to speak? Beth, I saw you wanted to weigh in on some part of that.
I just want to make a quick note.
All right, come on forward.
I do, in a sense, agree that I don't really see that we need any kind of a drivable space or even a walking space from any part of the emergency exit to any of those lots. I think the emergency exit, since that's all it's supposed to ever be, is an emergency exit should remain completely separate from, the proposed building areas. It you know, nobody really needs to, if you want to do a sidewalk on the other side is one thing, but I think tall evergreens should be along there. Then there's the emergency exit, then there's our buffer left alone, and our trees and everything left alone. And I think it would keep it a little more separate and prevent people or from driving in through there. That's just a thought, that maybe take that into account. But the other thing I wanted to note with the emergency exit, where Mike was noting where that gate is off a lot, I've kind of watched it, because I can't help it, because I drive by there to go home all the time, and I've watched over the years. Typically, it's been missing when the plows have come. So I think when someone's removed it when the plows have come, and they haven't thought to to put it back where it belongs. So maybe just make a note to them, whoever tends to be in charge of plowing through there, be sure to put that back when you're done. That's when I've seen it missing the most. It has been damaged once or twice and been replaced, but typically I think it's been when plowing's gone on, so maybe encourage people to put it back. Because the point of it is to remain blocked off for obvious reasons. That's just a thought. I think that might help.
Any other abutters or citizens wish to weigh in? This won't be your final chance, but we'll close the public hearing and invite the applicant back up to address whatever of the public comments.
Just a few things. There were some recurrent themes, as I'm sure you all noticed. We will look at opportunities for augmenting the buffer. I guess the sidewalk connection between Camp Sargent Road and the main part and Premium Outlet Boulevard was really at the behest of the planning board. So if you would prefer, we can delete that from the plans. I guess my feeling is that now that there is essentially no traffic on that emergency access road, that it functions as a 24-foot wide sidewalk.
It's a big sidewalk.
So we can remove that from the plans, and it gives us a little bit more room to put some more evergreens in, or whatever we decide needs to be done in that area. With respect to water usage, and I'm kind of taking these in no particular order, but as I heard them, there was an overall water usage amount that was negotiated with NVD when we did the outlets. Current use, which is not necessarily a predictor of future use, is approximately 20% of that limit. So we have a great deal of capacity for domestic use, but the fire use was also included in that calculation. So we're in the process of having our engineers look at water and both domestic and fire demand. But as you recall, the gap between what was available in the system and what the need was for fire demand was the whole reason that we have the water tank there. This site is also served by that water tank. So I'm confident we can work something out, and obviously we're going to have to get something worked out with MVD before the project can go forward. I think that you addressed the sort of open parking situation. The intent would be to have walls there and have a facade. It's not going to be like an open parking structure on with the buildings on pillars essentially. For ventilation purposes, there probably will be openings in the walls, but they'll be louvered, so you won't have light impacts. With regard to the dumpsters, I think that operational concerns are certainly reasonable. We should limit those to sort of normal business hours, in my opinion, but I certainly respect and understand, why nobody wants them to be banging dumpsters at 5 o'clock in the morning. So, and we can look and see what kind of options we might have for locations for those.
Also, I don't want to send you tasking your architect with something particularly complicated, but showing us what those enclosures would look like around those dumpsters.
Yeah, okay.
And getting a sense of visually what you're talking about.
Yeah, okay.
For those.
there may be something on the plans, but, you know, we'll take a look at that and provide some additional information. Blasting, you know, I don't believe that there's going to be any significant blasting. There may be some trench blasting involved for utilities. Most of the utilities were installed as a part of the original go-around. So there are utilities that go down essentially the emergency access road and stub into the property. I'm not at all positive that all of those stubs wound up in exactly the correct location. So we'll take another look at that and have some additional information for the board at a future meeting.
And go the extra mile to avoid blasting.
Yeah, I mean, if it's just, if we can hoe-ram it, we can hoe-ram it. But we did have blasting on, we did have some blasting associated with the access road when we did that construction. There were limitations placed on it in terms of no ANFO or encapsulated blasting materials rather than, you know, the stuff that they squirt down into the hole. So, I mean, I'm confident that we can work out a solution that will be safe for the groundwater and drinking water supply of Merrimack, and yet be reasonable for development. I would draw the board's attention to you know, we talked a little bit about buffers and about building setbacks. In the I-2 district, there is no building height limitation. There's none. So we kind of picked 65 feet as a maximum that's reasonable with the equipment that the fire department has. We still have to complete those conversations with the fire department. So you know, they may have a different idea, or they may have requirements of us that, you know, cause us to change direction on that. So, but that's the current thinking, is that, you know, 65 will be the maximum. But I draw the board's attention to the fact that we are conforming with the setbacks and the buffers that were and are still in place. We are doing our best to be, in the context of this kind of development, to be as compatible with surrounding areas as we possibly can be. And the allowed uses on this property would allow this and more to be built. So, so with regard to reasonable, you know, when you're considering reasonable impact, I think you need to consider it in the context of what is allowed as of right. And that will be that. I think the other thing to bring to your attention is that capacity exists to handle traffic. And as we envision it in this scenario, adding the number of trips that are calculated to be created by this development is not going to diminish the capacity of the intersection or the operations at Premium Outlets Boulevard and Industrial Drive. And you know, there are, because of the retail nature of the outlets, there are a couple of days a year, perhaps one or two, that additional traffic control is required, and the developers or the owners of the mall have been more than willing to ask the Merrimack Police Department and closely coordinate with them. And I have not heard of 2-hour delays. I mean, maybe that first year there was an issue, but I honestly have not heard, and I suspect that we would have gotten a call from someone if there was that kind of an issue. So I'm not quite sure where that's coming from. We can certainly talk to the police and find out what their specific concerns might be. But again, I think that what we have on the table is going to work the best of any of the alternatives that we've looked at. So with that, I think I will. I understand that we have a lot more work to do here. So.
Absolutely. Let's go around with some questions. Desiree.
Okay, just a few notes. I think I'd like to recommend that some additional renderings be provided to kind of help the abutters kind of understand how it'll fit scale-wise. If one was done from like kind of the side of like one spruce, that corner one,
Yeah.
so you can see like, hey, you're in the backyard of this person's house, or this is how tall the building's going to be, or kind of how it would be screened. I know you can populate it with the trees and stuff and try to get an idea of what that kind of a building looks like with regard from that view.
And
then
just on that subject, I mean, we always take the approach of, kind of doing things on, concentrating on doing things, in this case, 100 feet from the property line, right? Because we have this existing buffer. There may be an opportunity to do a more effective planting if we gain permission from some of the abutters to have minor impacts on their properties. So, in other words, you can either plant something really tall, on the, 100 feet away from your property line because you're looking at an angle of, like a cutoff angle of view, or you can plant something that is more modest, closer to the viewpoint. Right. So, if the abutters are amenable to it, we can certainly talk to them about planting a few trees on their property that may very well be much more effective than anything we can do on our property. Right. So I just offer that up as an idea.
That's nice for that.
I appreciate the idea and the offering. I'm going to have to leave that to you and to the abutters to figure out how to connect with each other, because the planning board can't be the middleman of that.
Yep, no, I understand. We'll reach out to some people.
But certainly if they're happy and not coming here and testifying about the thing, then that helps things.
I'm not done, sorry. I got more. I have a couple more. If maybe a detail could be provided, like kind of a section showing like what the opening in the parking lot, or the parking, like the level of the parking. And
a section through the building.
Yeah, a section through the parking when you're in the parking garage, kind of looking out that way. So like, are the cars recessed down? Like where would it be normal headlights, or if like a big SUV, kind of how that, or if it's just a louver and it's not going to come out at all, then that's fine. Right now it's shown as an opening with what looks like a partial fencing through there, which I'm sure is a security measure kind of thing.
Yeah.
But obviously you want to have the open ventilation for the parking below. And then I wanted to just ask the question, because on your plans, like looking at C3, in the area of the access road up there, and in the buffer area, there's some dashed lines up there and like some grayed out.
Okay.
Kind of I was just curious, because we're saying we're not touching the line of that, and I was just it looks different.
There is a little bit. We're not touching the buffer.
Okay.
There is a bit of a different angle on the access road. Okay. So we are moving the access. We're straightening out the access road a little bit, but the buffer remains intact.
Okay, because it looks like, even just looking at the clouded outline that comes around where the buffer is, like you have a thick one, a new thick looking one, and you have another one that's inside. So just graphically, it looks like the buffer. Maybe the buffer just got corrected and you're like, this is really where it is, but it looks like it's cut back graphically.
Okay, we can clarify
just look at that. Those are all my questions or comments. Thank you.
Can I offer one comment?
Of course you can.
When I'm not sure which of the communications companies put up a tower on the Home Depot site, before they put it up, because there was some people who objected to how tall this thing was going to look, they actually tethered a balloon so that the top of the balloon was the height of the tower, to sort of convince all of us, and certainly I'm convinced, that it really wasn't an eyesore. Now, I'm not suggesting necessarily we do it in the next week or two, but it might help people if you go to where the end of B or C is, and then put a balloon up so people could see. It might give them an idea of what they are actually going to see, because I think they're thinking it worse than it actually is. It's only a thought, but
we'll take that under consideration. You may recall the Elmo and Big Bird balloons that I put up in the trees for the outlets.
I do. That's why I'm still there. Yes.
Building on that thought, if the board has a desire to do a site visit with this, that would be a good opportunity for there to be something like that where
Some
we can take a
indication,
look at
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Of what that height looks like. And I don't know, does the
Absolutely
board
good
want to go
idea.
have a site visit?
With snowshoes?
At some point.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, somebody offered us to stand in their yard.
Maybe not
One of the
Miss-
nice ladies
Miss
said
Burns.
we could come to and stand in her yard and see.
I think they all did,
But
basically.
did it include coffee and donuts? Yeah, all right, good. But I mean, no, seriously. I think if we could stand in their yards and see where the balloon is, it might give all of us, as well as the abutters, obviously, a feel of what it's going to look like. And I do recommend it as a method of giving everybody a feel.
So it seems like we want to do a site visit, whether we're able to pull this off or not. Can you look into it and see
Yep.
whether that's feasible
Yep,
to do?
absolutely.
I think it'd be a lot of help rather than trying to imagine how tall that is. I don't know what else other than a balloon could give us a visual of 50, 60 feet high.
Scaffolding.
No, we don't.
But you gotta climb it.
You could ask the fire department to come run a ladder up there. Have a look at it.
It's an outer floor.
See, there you go.
Yes, so you could do it with Tom.
I want to touch on a couple of subjects that are maybe out of bounds and maybe beyond what I should be talking about. But if you've been reading the press of late, I'm sure you're aware that there's some issues in Merrimack developing partially as a function of current or recent developments, expansions in the community, mostly with respect to hotels and things of that nature. And so what I'm concerned about, you made a statement early on that this is positive, fiscally feasible and all that kind of stuff. And yet we're finding ourselves maybe fighting that factor on several fronts at the moment with expansions to the police and fire departments in order to deal with issues in town.
Right.
Partially coming about because of easy access on and off of the highway, which is kind of a boon and a bang at the same time. You refer to 65 feet being something that the fire department can handle, but I sit on the council and hear time and time again how the ladder truck we have is getting old and needs a lot of repair, and we're constantly having to do things to fix it. And I look at the price of a replacement ladder truck, and I'm having to have doubts about the fiscal positive impact that things like this are having if we're having to go out and buy a new ladder truck to be able to get to the top of the 5th floor or something like that. And so I think there's some things that really need to be carefully considered when you make your height decision on where the buildings should be and things like that. Because we are facing some very large expenses in both the police and the fire for staffing and for equipment to handle things like this. And we've had people come at other hotel locations and say, well, we'll put up a 6-story building because you can get to it with our ladder truck. And I'm going, well, it may be, but that ladder truck's only got another couple of years of life in it. And we have to replace it if we've got now all these 5- and 6-story buildings around that we're going to try and protect with it. And that's $500,000 or more out of whack and things of that nature. So there's a lot of concerns that I have there for equipment and staffing issues that may not have been taken into account in your previous fiscal impact study. I haven't seen or heard of it.
Yeah,
so I don't know.
I mean, it's a pretty simple fiscal impact, and it's based on existing budgets, and presumably there's capital expenses baked into, your budgeting. I'm not entirely familiar with the way Merrimack does things. I know that there have been some recent, kind of hiccups in terms of the way things have gone. But, basically it takes the costs and tries to come up with a per resident cost and a per employee cost for commercial properties, and, apportions those. I think that if you look at it, notwithstanding the height limitation, but with regard to the number of calls, I mean, I'm familiar with the issues that you're talking about. I mean, I think largely, frankly, those were management issues, not rather than, intrinsic to the use. For example, the fact that the hotel in question didn't require a credit card for use. Created some issues with people doing things that they would prefer not to have tracked, you know. And this is not going to be one of those situations. So, you know, we have a national brand, we have a national set of tenants that we're talking to in terms of the retail, and it's like, and yet we have a local management team, which I think is also important. I can't tell you that there aren't going to be any unforeseen issues, but I can tell you that they're not going to be the same issues that, you know, existed in other parts of town.
And I wouldn't pretend to suggest that there will be the same, but there will be issues. There will be things that come up that are not foreseen.
There always are.
And I don't think the current issues are going to go away, even if we quote unquote solve the drug problem in New Hampshire.
But at the same time, you know, we're talking about, you know, again, on a pro forma basis, we're talking about $1 million a year more, or I'm sorry, $600,000 a year more in revenue to the town than the costs that we've identified based on, you know, kind of a blended rate for townwide. So, you know, how about that?
And 2/3 or more of that goes to the school district, but okay.
Well,
I mean, I understand what
fair
you're
enough,
saying.
but, you know, it's also not coming out of somewhere, you know, it's not coming out of somewhere else, so.
The other thing that came up, I wondered if you could address quickly, is just snow removal. Do you have every intention of just piling snow up on the property, or would you remove
I mean,
it?
we do have, if you look at the way these places are managed, it's very similar to any other large commercial project. I mean, you manage the snow. Yes, you may pile it up, and in this case, you know, in this scenario, we have over 100, you know, spaces above and beyond what we've identified as the demand. So we have some places in the parking lot where we can pile snow. And if it gets to be unmanageable, you pick it up and you truck it off. I mean, that's what you do. And, you know, gone are the days where we pile it up at the side of the parking lots and call it a day. I mean, that just doesn't happen anymore because the tenants won't let you do that. And you know, it looks like crap, and, you know, it just becomes a pain for everybody. So you have to actively manage snow. I mean, it's just the reality of the world that we live in. So that's what they do at every other commercial site.
I agree, and I just wanted to make sure you mentioned that and brought it out, since it was brought up. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Dan, all the way down the end.
Yeah. Hey, how's it going? Just real quick. So, what's the current function of the access road as it is right now?
It's simply which access road? The emergency access?
Yeah, the emergency access road. It's strictly emergency to where? To the outlets?
What it does is it connects, you know, currently it goes from Camp Sargent Road and goes all the way in and connects to Premium Outlets Boulevard right about here. Okay. So, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because right now, you know, that's a dedicated access that is available to, you know, police and emergency services to not only access the site, but to stage their equipment for whatever incident is occurring. From there, we have a 10-foot wide parallel sidewalk, which is sized appropriately and is you know, structurally sound enough to handle emergency equipment. Should Premium Outlets Boulevard be all blocked up and, you know, it be inaccessible, there's a way to get equipment up there. As a part of this plan, we're proposing to extend that 10-foot parallel access way all the way back to where the dedicated emergency access road starts.
Gotcha.
So that same system will
Yeah,
exist.
that was my end question. So you believe that the way it's currently structured in your plans, that it can still achieve the same goals that was originally done?
We've met with the fire department, and we have implemented their recommendations.
Okay, perfect. And real quick, so for the school children that are going to be living in these apartment buildings, have you given any thought on drop off and pick up of school buses? Doesn't look like it's going to
Frankly,
fit.
no. I mean, there's going to be 12, there's going to be, if you do the numbers, there are going to be 12 school-aged children in 192 units. So
I understand what you're saying, but
I mean,
if that's one school bus, how is that school bus going to flow through that area?
they could come, I don't know what the policy, you probably know better than I do what the policy is. You don't go on private property, do you?
Well, we do go on private property. What normally has happened in Merrimack and most other school districts is there is a dedicated, like a sort of little waiting shed somewhere, and the bus comes to it. So the parents are required to walk their kids down to where this pickup point is. It's undercover, so they can stand out in the pouring rain, and the bus comes there and picks them up. That happens all through the town. I mean, in this particular time, if you were to go on a bus, you'd find all the parents would bring their little kids down in the car and are sitting in the car waiting for the school bus to come. So it works. It does work down. The school bus
we do have an area that we're contemplating for bus access, so we would be able to.
No, I'm thinking the place I'm thinking most of is Crossroads Path and a couple of the other sites down that far end of town where there are dedicated waiting areas for the kids. The bus comes down the normal access road and picks the kids up.
What I'm saying is that we are contemplating a transit shelter that would be integrated with the streetscape.
That's what it would be.
That would be.
That's what the school district would ask you to do.
Yeah. And in terms of getting around that site, I mean, if that's built so that the fire department's satisfied with it, those buses won't have any trouble at all getting through those spaces.
Right.
In fact, there is one of the left-hand side of the page, the facade of Building A has a link that doesn't have any access around it, where the fire department usually asks for it.
We can certainly provide a fire lane.
If they need it, talk to them.
Right. I'm sure that we'll be talking.
We're going to be talking to
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
But as long as the fire department can get around it, the buses are actually pretty darn
I think it
maneuverable.
actually works the other way. The fire department define turns as an SAU turn, which comes from the school district.
Our template is a school bus template because it mimics the size of our ladder truck.
Good. Thank you for that. Other comments or questions? Nelson?
Just one other question on a slightly different subject. We talked earlier about this being phase 1, and then there's phase 1A, 1B, 1C, and so on. Do you contemplate all of this remaining in one ownership, or will there be subdivisions of these?
We're not contemplating a subdivision. It may be, at the end of the day, for financing purposes or otherwise, that may be a condominium created or some other kind of arrangement. But the idea is that this will remain in single ownership.
Right now, that's the plan.
Yeah.
For single. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to get that.
Does that include, so you're not, the possibility that you'll have land leases and the building owner, the hotel owns the building and...
That is a possibility, but we haven't gotten that far with the financing yet.
Okay.
Just curious. Thank you.
Comments or questions? So if there's no further discussion in terms of the aspects of your plan, we ought to talk about where we go from here and what we need to accomplish between now and whenever we next want to sit down together.
Yeah, we have, just in terms of what I understand is outstanding, we obviously have the discussion with MVD to occur. We haven't received all the staff comments, so I'm assuming that, I'm kind of waiting for the peer review to come in from CLD and for all the staff comments to be assembled so that we can address them all kind of in a holistic way. So those are the two biggest things. I don't know how long it's going to take for Fuss and O'Neill to get their review. Heidi's been pretty good about it.
Yeah,
I can
let you know, they actually came in very late at the end of the day this afternoon, so I can get them out to you tomorrow morning.
Okay. So
it still takes the staff some time to digest the results from that.
We should probably schedule a meeting with staff and kind of go over, what additional documentation you're looking for in terms of, I don't know, phasing definitions and, all of that kind of stuff. And then we need to do a site walk and, we need to address these issues that we've discussed this evening. So I guess it's kind of your pleasure. Tim suggested the 20th of February, or 20th of February.
That's right.
Is that right? That would be, what, 5 weeks from now? 4.5 weeks from now? 5
Yeah,
weeks?
so our next meeting is the 6th, so that's very close. And other than that, you're out to the 20th.
Right.
2 a month. And you got to deal with sort of how much time does it take to provide appropriate public notice of a meeting and all that.
Right.
The site walk itself is technically a public meeting, so we've got to have that noticed properly as well.
Right, so we wouldn't be able to do that. We'd probably have to schedule that for 3 weeks out.
How long, Robert, we need like 10 days?
Yeah, 10 days.
10 days notice to do a site.
But,
yeah.
Functionally,
So-
I mean, I know how that,
Yeah.
that works.
So you could certainly do it the Saturday that's roughly 11 days from now, but that's probably too close. So the one that's 18 days from now, which is, you got the calendar right here.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Coming right up.
Do abutters need to be notified on that?
Yeah.
They
On a
don't
sidewalk?
get, they don't get
They
mail,
get
yeah.
notified through this meeting here
Okay.
of when it is, and it's a public agenda
What's
that's
the
posted along with the
day?
planning boards.
Gotcha.
One,
There-
two,
there's no official.
There's no mailing for that.
Okay, thank you.
10th of February, you could do the site walk.
Saturday, the 10th of February, hoping that the weather keeps the snow off the ground.
Okay.
One.
No? Do you
Yep.
want, do you feel like you want, I mean, wait, it's more or less a public site. You can go here anytime you want, so.
Go ahead, yeah. I'll take.
Well, except he's going to fly our balloon.
I can't leave it on the top.
Is February 10th work for everybody other than Nelson that wants to go or would go?
Yep.
Yes. It worked for me. This far out, we would do it early in the morning, not crazy early, but I don't know.
Like 9 o'clock?
8,
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
8 o'clock is too early. That's
8 is
crazy
too
early.
What?
Is that,
8 is too early for you? 9
What?
o'clock.
What's wrong?
is that the Super Bowl weekend? Does that matter? You going to the Super Bowl?
Well, yeah, but that'd be a Sunday.
It's on the Saturday. It's it's a good 48 hours between
Well, some of
sidewalk
us,
and
get
Super
all
Bowl.
revved
40
up for
hours.
this kind of thing,
Squeeze that in somewhere.
I'm glad to see you get your priorities.
Well,
Yeah, I get quite right.
I can get the game
it's
on
not
my phone
Premier
or something
League, but
like
it's
that. if
pretty
you-
important to us, okay?
It probably will be very important to us.
You're making it. You
All
never
right.
know.
So February the 20th, a site walk on the 10th,
10th.
and then you're going to deal with the staff to figure out what to catch up on
Yep.
all of the other things.
Do you want a motion to that effect?
What's
9
that?
o'clock as well. Yes.
9 o'clock. Okay. I don't know that all of that needs to be in a motion other than the continuance to the 20th. Paul?
For the site walk, is there a public notification of that?
That's why I think a motion would be a good idea, just
Yeah.
to formalize it. That way we can post it and it's all there. But it formalizes the fact that you're having the site walk on that date and time.
Sounds fine to me.
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to make a motion?
Please do.
I'd like to make a motion. We consider a sidewalk on the Saturday, the 10th of February, and then continue this matter otherwise till February the 20th at 7 o'clock in this room with no further notice to abutters.
I'll accept that motion if you allow me to indicate that the site walk will be at 9 o'clock in the morning, and that we'll all meet at roughly where the
Where the roundabout might be.
where the roundabout would be, or where that emergency
You can
access
pull into
road
the
meets
emergency
MPO.
if we have your permission. Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. Is there a second for Alistair's motion as modified? I'm counting for Lynn. She didn't get to second anything else tonight. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 700. So we'll see you on the 10th and the 20th of February. Perfect. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you to all the abutters for offering the testimony and for hanging out with us until 10:30 at night. with that, we are at the point of discussion of and possible action regarding other items of concern.
I don't know. I don't know. You want to talk?
Hold on just a second.
We're going to do minutes or?
So, on discussion, possible action regarding other items of concern, the only general discussion to offer up is that we have had set a couple of deadlines for folks to respond with potential comments about the pedestrian map that NRPC created and how that might be morphed into the makings of a plan. Nelson's offered some comments, and other than what we've spoken about here, I don't know if anybody else has. You certainly don't have to, but if you want to, let's get those into the staff. We also need to have some discussion and consideration of how, as a planning board, we might gather other people's input or feedback on that map and potential pedestrian plan. We had talked about potentially staffing some tables at elections, and although several of us had indicated a willingness, I don't know where we go from there in terms of finding out whether that's permissible, and if it is permissible, who and how you make arrangements to do that at our various polling places.
Thank you very much.
So how does that work if we wanted to have a
It is
space?
permissible, and if you want to do it, you can do it.
How many polling places are you going to have at our next election? And when's our next election?
In town, there are 3 places, and you do not have access at the church, unless you want to do something outside.
What's-
Inside, you can have access to the middle school, or the upper elementary school, and at the middle school, potentially we could do
I don't
something.
think you're turned on.
What are the 3 places, please?
Middle school, upper elementary school, and St. John Newman.
Okay, middle school is.
The new
The new school.
middle school.
Okay, all right.
Well,
Those are both indoors.
Up at Madeline Bennett.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
And then, but Newman, we can't go inside?
No.
Okay.
Why do you say that?
Because the church does not allow it.
If we talk to the church, do you think they might give us permission?
They might. I'm not sure you're going to have space. That's very, very tight space.
Oh, I understand.
Yep.
I go there every Sunday.
Yep. Not to vote, you don't.
Then near the place.
I know.
All right, so the desire is to provide some folks probably with, maybe we'd print out a bunch of those maps and be able to have people take them with them and have on that piece of paper where they could, some phone number or website or email address that they could send some comments. And then me or Nelson or anybody else that's interested standing around answering questions if anybody has them. It doesn't make a lot of sense to do that if it's cold outside and bad weather because people aren't going to talk to you or take your information or brochure. You could probably throw a bunch of stuff on a table somewhere and if anybody wants to grab it, they could grab it. But I don't love the idea of kind of missing a big chunk of the town because of one of the polling sites really isn't accessible.
Big
but
chunk. There's only about 17% of the town turn up.
Well,
am I not right?
And there's only about, 15 to 20% go there, so.
You got about 25% down there. 25%.
But am I right on the overall number?
Oh, considering the fact that we've gotten feedback from no people so far. If we access some people,
That's right.
it's
Not-
better
it's not a
than
bad idea.
some is better than
That's
none,
right.
as I've done that math before.
Do the math.
We did the math. So, if we have your permission to do it, at least in the 2 sites where we
Yep.
can, do you have any contacts with the church to reach out to them and ask them if they'd give us permission or some space to do it? All right, so you'll untangle that. I'm willing to man one of these tables. Nelson
I'll
would.
do
We
one.
would need a third person that's
And we
willing
need
to.
some more people too. We can take turns, everybody can participate in this.
Yeah, it doesn't stink to
Not
take
me.
turns.
Not
Yeah,
me.
Lynn's
She's gotta
busy.
stay neutral.
Technically, I can't either, I'm late, but.
Well, the polling
Depends
goes
whether
till 8
Lynn-
o'clock
whether
at night.
Lynn's having my services.
Okay, other than the election place or the polling place, is there any other ideas that people have for gathering some input We could certainly post things on the Facebook forum thing.
Forum is the best.
That
yeah.
well, it is for the 700 people that are members.
There
Well,
is
but that's
a
700
winter
that
carnival.
might not otherwise.
There is a winter carnival that we're, as the town center committee, is going to staff that with a booth, which we've done in past years. You get a number of people through there. It's certainly not a large percentage of the
That's-
Well, they're
town.
getting a lot
That's-
more
oh, yeah.
participation now than they have in the past.
That's
so-
February 24th.
Yes.
I mean, if you listen to Matt Kasparis, all of their different programs through Parks and Rec are getting much more
Oh, yeah.
participation than they
well,
did. So,
we've been trying to take advantage of that with the town center committee in going out, and no reason why we couldn't double up and do both.
that's true.
I don't know what my availability is on the 24th, but in terms of at least providing the materials, and if you're there with other people with
We'll
similar
have
interest.
people there all.
Oh, I know what
through
mine
the
are
event.
then.
Yeah.
0.
So we'll take care of that.
We went down
Okay?
to London for the
Town Center Committee will shill for you at that.
It sounds good to me. I don't know if everybody's got anybody has the will to do it, but every time from the Rotary Club we've wanted to do something with Merrimack TV, they would do a half an hour something.
Yeah.
And you
Oh,
could
yeah.
show the map and talk about it, and I mean, I don't know if the NRPC folks could even be there to talk about it a little bit too. But
That's another,
if you wanted to do a
Another
half an
forum.
hour thing.
yeah.
So
Another thing you might do is set up a table at the farmer's market
Well, yeah.
Wednesday
we do,
afternoon.
We do that too. We've kind of gone down to one farmer's market a year. We get the same people at the farmer's market every
That's
week.
okay, yeah.
And,
But
yeah,
to do it
yeah.
once in a while,
Yeah. Yeah, no, we've been covering farmer's market, we cover the 4th of July,
Okay.
we cover the winter carnival. Those
So
are the
I want to
things
make sure
we've been
as we talk about these ideas, if we're going to do them, that we're here deciding who is going to go do these things. And, you know, I've volunteered to do the thing with the elections along with Nelson, and we'll find a third person. Tom's going to check with the church to see if that's allowed. And the winter carnival, we could get some materials to the folks that are already there on behalf of the town center committee. In terms of making a TV program on the Merrimack TV, it doesn't matter to me whether we actually do that or not. I think it's a good idea, but it takes somebody to say, I'm gonna reach out to them and set up a time and think about who sits at the table and what do they say, and
Yes.
somebody's got to actually run with the ball. And if nobody wants to, then let's pass on the idea. But anyone interested
I
in
got
helping
too
out with those
many
things?
irons in the fire already.
All right, so we're not going to do the television program at that rate. Let's do
Right
what
now.
we've talked about doing so far. I think that Tim has the ability to post directly onto the Merrimack Forum as the
Yep.
community development director, which is better than any of us doing it.
Yeah.
And he can formulate whatever message there is to say, here's a link to the map. If you want to comment, send it to this email address.
Mhm.
And that's really kind of
Yeah.
what that's about.
Should we, or have we maybe come up with some probing questions?
That's a good idea.
So that like they have like, you could say anything, but like, what are your thoughts on a few things to try to get consistent answers?
Yep.
And then they can say whatever else that they will say beyond it.
I think that it's a great idea to have those kinds of questions. I think off the top of my head, asking things like, do you currently walk around town? And if so, where do you start and where do you end? You know, where are you at right now?
Mhm.
Is there sidewalks there? How do you feel or comfortable or not when you're walking in those areas? You won't get necessarily enough data to cover an area, but you'll get a handful of people who say, you know, I walk my kids to the school and it's fine or it's not.
You know, the glitch in all of this, it just comes to me now, is that this study with the NRPC is for Route 3 only.
Mm.
You know, is just Route 3.
Right.
And if we open it up, if we're going to open it up to the whole town, maybe
You're going to get an awful lot of.
you get a lot of stray material that would be useful if we were doing a study for the whole town. But
Well, I think that
So,
having it's not a bad thing, even if we don't.
So I think the probing questions need to focus on DW Highway. I mean, that's where
Yes,
that's
you're
where
right.
the
Yeah.
interest is. So don't say, where do you walk in town, but say,
do you
when
walk
you
here?
go downtown or when you walk here, where do you go,
Would you
or
walk
something
along
like
these
that.
in these areas?
yeah.
Mm.
Or do you think there needs to be connection here
Yeah.
or whatever?
I'll volunteer to kind of draft some questions for
Hey,
that.
good.
There,
Good,
yeah,
good.
there, yeah, there we go.
All right.
And then I'll run them
Nelson's
by.
Day.
Yeah. Well, I'll probably bug him about it, but nonetheless, I'll lead that part of it to
All
get.
in favor of Desiree doing all the work?
No, that is not what I'm saying. That's it. I'm out.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. So I think that advances that ball a little bit. I've privately talked to Tim a couple of times about getting us a sense of what our last move has been and what our next move should be in terms of implementing the master plan recommendations. I don't really have any news on that front, but I suspect that Tim's always very good about getting that information together and getting back to us. So I
Probably
suspect
after he's done the budget.
this pedestrian plan was kind of a big. It satisfies like 7 different kinds of implementation pieces, and pursuing this was actually one of the things that had us not having to talk about master plan at every single meeting because this opportunity is available to us. So it's not like we're not doing anything, but it's a 2013 master plan. This is 2018. We're halfway through it. We're 5 years from drawing another one.
Are you?
Actually, it takes a couple of years to do them, you know.
Yeah. I mean, usually the last time we started in year 10, drafting the next one, so the
We
old
always
one
start with
lasted
the census data.
12 and 13
Yeah,
years. So
yeah, we wait for the census.
okay. I don't have any other items of concern. Does anybody else have any updates or information that they want to offer? Okay, that brings us to, do we have a set of minutes to consider?
Set of minutes,
The
yeah.
minutes of January 2nd, 2018. What's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we take them as read.
Is there a second for Alistair's motion? Second by Desiree?
I have a suggestion.
Nelson?
Page 9, line 22 says another 40 had to be saved. I'm not sure what those
Another
were.
40 what?
feet. There's a tick at the end, but I'm not sure what.
40 feet.
40 feet.
Oh, I didn't see that little thing.
You drew on it.
Okay. All right, another 40 feet had to be saved. I thought it was maybe 40 souls or something. I didn't know what they were saying.
Wrong meeting.
So it still is worthy of another word or two to say another 40 feet of the existing building had to be saved.
That would be much more clear. Thank you.
Does that work for
I think that's a good idea. Yes, I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to incorporate that in my motion.
Okay. So there is a motion and a second to approve the minutes as amended with Nelson's change. Are there any other changes? If there are none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 7-0-0 to approve the minutes, and that brings us to.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we adjourn.
Is there a second for Alistair's motion? Second by Desiree. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
You don't
Any
realize
abstaining?
that a couple
We're
of
adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone, and don't forget to turn your microphones off.